Chapter 21. An Excuse for Gambling. The group reached the principal's office. A tanned short man with a thick beard and a rather stylish outfit sat down and stared in surprise at the arriving group. As soon as the principal noticed Alian, he fidgeted subtly. Seeker, who saw that, frowned slightly. Was there more to this school than what the eyes see? Miss Serple, how may I help you today? He asked courteously. Principal Decker, I have received reports from Ted Zircon here that this student, Seeker Carlean, is engaged in various gambling activities and has even promoted this vice to the school. Cypril smiled sweetly as she delivered her sentence. The principal was shocked to hear that. However, he knew what the necessary actions he needed to take to please this puppet master. What, is that true? He glared angrily towards Seeker. Before Seeker could even utter a word, the teacher continued. Gambling is among the illegal activities that the school takes a firm stand in. We do not allow and encourage students to gamble. At this moment, Seeker started to chuckle. This was a surprising twist. The principal was berating Seeker, but Seeker simply laughed. What's so funny? The principal roared angrily. First of all, good afternoon to you, honored principal. Second of all, I believe we have not yet heard about the issue, and yet judgment has already been passed. Miss Serple has just received this report from Teddy here and has yet to verify the truth of these claims. So I don't really know on what grounds am I being charged. Seeker smiled. Ted was surprised. Anger started building up. He hated the nickname Teddy. Alian was just as surprised. She did not expect that timid student who just lazed around the room would ever be this bold. The principal was surprised as well. This student clearly held no fear in their current situation. Nonsense. Miss Cypril is one of the most respected teachers that has graced this institute. Of course, she would check and verify before bringing this accusation towards me. All right, then what is the exact nature of my so-called gambling activities? Seeker turned to Alian with a smile that matched her deviously angelic smile. Alian was flustered and angry at the same time. She only received the report that Seeker was gambling as to what Ted reported. Ted, would you mind elaborating it once more? I might convey it differently. Alian smiled sweetly towards Ted. Lind and Merrill clutched their fist in frustration. It was obvious that this was just a random act to entrap Seeker, but the principal was ignoring it. Principal Decker, I was shocked to discover why people were flocking towards Seeker earlier today. He was apparently the celebrity who caused a commotion at the gates. It is because he is a skilled online gambler. This is why he is famous. Worst still, people are praising him. My hope that the school will not become a den of gamblers if students like Seeker are left unchecked. Merrill had to contain the urge to shout back at Ted. Even the meek Lind was silently gripping his hands. A rare look of anger flashed in the eyes of Lind. Seeker, who observed everything around him, was smiling. In fact, he was happy. He stared back at Ted and shook himself as if he pitied the fool. What an idiot, Seeker voiced out in pity. Ted had to control the shaking of his hands. No one had ever called him that to his face. What did you say, you rising rat? Ted angrily cursed. Obviously, you both know nothing of what it is I am doing. Gambling? It was an online stream and was receiving donations from my viewers and fans. Haven't you heard of the phrase online celebrity? Look it up. I'm sure a royal and a teacher could easily access the internet. Seeker laughed. Ted and Alian glared towards Seeker. This was the first time that Alian lost her composure and revealed her true face. The president gulped as he saw the face of Alian. Seeker, your behavior is rebellious, and this is a clear act of insubordination. The principal raged. Why? Merrill could no longer remain silent. Seeker is right. No one has even investigated Seeker's actions. Sure, there was a feature where people could place bets on, but what he did was after school. Merrill complained without giving the principal and Alian any ounce of respect. Oh, so there is gambling. There you have it, Principal Decker. A claim that Seeker is gambling. Alian immediately responded. Merrill paled once she realized what she did. No, it's not, Lind finally shouted. Ted, Alian, and Principal Decker were startled at Lind's sudden roar. They looked at the tall teen, and a hint of fear emerged in their heart. Seriously? A complaining sigh was heard, but no one paid any attention to it. Merrill took the opportunity at this momentary silence. The only betting that took place involved Seeker challenging the demands of the viewers whether or not he can or cannot fulfill a certain challenge. This is in no way similar to gambling activities that the school bans. Wait, don't royals host a betting challenge during school plays? Lind added. Yes, that's right. Doesn't the Summer Slam event of our school use bet boxes? And aren't they organized by the royals? Meryl challenged Ted. Yeah. How is that allowed and Seeker not allowed? Ted was surprised at the sudden switch. That is not, we don't. Ted started to stutter and could not provide an accurate response. That is different. The principal frowned. No, it's not. It's similar. There's a contest. For Zeke, there's a challenge. People bet on which side they think will win. If that is allowed on school, why can't Seeker do the same online? Ted was quickly rummaging through his phone, hoping to find more things which he could use against Seeker. But then, the principal came to the rescue. The Summer Slam bets are used to foster a competitive spirit across the year levels so that they will be further motivated to perform. What Seeker is doing is just plain gambling. That's right, Ted finally spoke. We do it so that the entire school can take it seriously. Not to mention that it's a legitimate school fundraising activity. We give 20% of our earnings to the school. Seeker is just gambling. That is correct. Seeker has no excuse or reason to gamble, especially when he is gambling the money that his parents clearly gave him to pay for tuition. The principal accused. Meryl was frustrated. Why was the principal so keen on defending Ted and Alian Cipral? She once believed this principal to be fair and kind. This was not who he was now. Is their school involved in the dark nature of their homeroom teacher's secret drug business? Miss Principal Decker, Ted shouted in shock. The two were startled and turned to Ted. Seeker has earned up to 35,000 credits in just 2 days. The revelation was too shocking for Ted. No wonder Seeker reached online celebrity level. He was indeed capable. What? The two chorused. Greed filled the eyes of Alian. Looks like your gambling spree has reached a terribly dangerous level. Indeed, Miss Cipral is right. As I suspected, he is even stealing from his parents. Shame on you, Seeker. The principal glared at Seeker, but a hint of anticipation was left in his eyes. No, Seeker didn't get all that through gambling. More than half of that was earned through donations and the paywall on his stream. Meryl angrily reacted. That's right. People pay to watch Seeker. That's why he's a celebrity. Cipral took the phone from Ted and browsed through the stream. Seeker remained silent. He looked as if he was waiting for something. In fact, he had a very detached look as if he did not care what would happen to him. The only things that interested him are the anger that his two friends would display. Seeker is doing a legitimate act. Hundreds of people in the stream can testify that Seeker was not gambling. Meryl erupted once more. Seeker is no gambler. Lind roared as well. The three accusers suddenly flinched. The principal took the initiative to step forward, meeting the rage of Lind. Lies. You three are in line for expulsion, the principal declared righteously as he approached the angered Lind. This is a blatant breach and a disgrace to the integrity and characters that a student of West Philpangaea High should have. All right, I've had enough of this. Seeker finally spoke. Principal Decker, you said that the gambling done during the Summer Slam was allowed because it has a specific purpose or goal to reach, correct? Yes. To foster and build dash. So if I have a legitimate reason for doing my said gambling, then will it also be allowed? Seeker interrupted with a smile. Legitimate reason? We? Your teachers are the ones responsible for approving and denying legitimate reasons. The principal shouted. What if it's a medical excuse? You allow the use of medical marijuana in this school. So if I have a medical excuse for gambling, will I be allowed? Seeker smiled once more. The principal and Ted started to laugh. Even Alian stopped perusing the stream to give a soft chuckle at Seeker's claim. And what authority would provide you with a legitimate medical excuse for gambling? Not what, but who? And he should be outside. Seeker smiled and pointed out the window. Outside the window was a flock of students who were once again forming a fan circle. Principal Decker and Alian frowned and immediately went out of the room to have a closer look. They went to the hall outside of the office and observed the commotions through the parapet of the second-floor hall. They were shocked. Dr. Charles Lindmet, marry me, a disgraced teacher shouted. Several other female teachers shouted the same thing. The female flock of students also cried similar sentiments. They continued to encircle the famous doctor, but received no form of special treatment as the doctor seemed preoccupied and tried to squeeze through the crowd. In fact, he seemed to be in a hurry. He paid little attention to the cheers, cries, and proposals around him. A single, rich and handsome doctor was in their midst. But more than that, he was even more famous than most stars in their country. In fact, there were rumors that Charles Lindmet is to receive a title making him equal to national heroes. Dr. Charles Lindmet, Principal Decker exclaimed. Alian had a look of lust in her eyes. Before her was one of the most handsome, rich, and famous men in the entire Pangean nations. You better hurry, Principal Decker. I called him here to discuss my medical condition, which can exempt me from the penalties of your so-called gambling crusade. Seeker stood confidently and started waving towards Charles. Principal Decker was about to angrily bash Seeker when shock appeared before his eyes. Dr. Charles Lindmet, to name a few of his credentials, is the leading figure in neuroalteration science, attributed for the discovery and application of the cure for Alzheimer's disease, a famous model and actor, and a potential national hero of the Pangean nations. And despite all of these incredible titles, Dr. Charles Lindmet was waving back at Seeker Carlean. Chapter 22. A simple method to resolve conflicts. Charles paid no heed to the crowd and raced quickly towards the building where he saw Seeker stood. Time was of the essence. The screaming crowd tried to follow, and some were even holding on to Charles's clothes. "I'm sorry, would you please?" Charles lamented. "Students, teachers, behave yourselves." A loud shout was heard. The principal arrived on the first floor and berated the fanatic students. The crowd jolted awake as the principal arrived. "Get away from him. He is a distinguished guest on our campus," the principal shouted once more. The crowd was backing away, but some students and even teachers were glaring angrily at the principal. What a killjoy. "Don't worry, guys. Charles and I would do a quick autograph signing and a meet and greet later. Right, Charles?" Seeker announced. "Seeker," the principal angrily shouted, but before he could continue, "Right." Charles confirmed, though there was a painful look in his eyes. The principal was startled. He didn't know how to continue. "All right, everyone. Dr. Charles has to discuss something with the principal. Please wait for us in a bit." Seeker smiled. Seeker immediately went upstairs, and Charles immediately followed. The principal paled in fright. Seeker was serious when he said Charles would give him an excuse. He appeared to be very close to Charles. It even appeared that Seeker could order him around. What was going on? He's the Charles Lindmet, yet he seems to be at the beck and call of a rising student who they were trying to punish. The principal rushed to follow the two who were on their way back to the office. As Seeker and Charles arrived at the principal's office, Alian immediately walked forward. "Dr. Charles Lindmet, I am a huge fan of Dash." "Cut the crap, Charles. This teacher is trying to expel Seeker," Merrill interrupted angrily. After the Great Oppression now, was there time to reverse the situation? Alian was surprised that Charles didn't mind the casual use of his first name. No famous doctor would, but Merrill could. If looks could kill, Merrill would need to reincarnate 100 times now. Charles immediately frowned. As the principal was just to walk in the office, Charles immediately addressed him. "Mr. Principal, I believe that there has been a misunderstanding." Charles frowned. "Misunderstanding? This is not a misunderstanding, Charles. They were trying to kick Seeker out." There was rage in Lynn's eyes. The accusers were surprised at Lynn's sudden temperament. They even backed away from Lynn unconsciously. Of course, all except Seeker and Merrill. Charles stared at Lynn in surprise. He knew what this was. He gazed at Seeker, and Seeker simply had an "I told you" look. The three accusers were scared. They observed how these three would talk to Charles as if they were close friends. "This is really a misunderstanding," the principal immediately voiced out in fear. "Dr. Charles, I am the principal of this school, Jonathan Decker. We are here because of the reports of which Seeker has been gambling online, spending thousands of Sidians. We, as his teacher, has to take the necessary actions to discipline and instruct him, otherwise we would have failed as a teacher." The principal immediately pleaded. "Principal Jonathan, allow me to explain Zeke's situation. As you know, Zeke was hospitalized a few days ago. I took over the case and observed that Zeke is actually suffering from a unique neurological disorder. This was why he suddenly suffered from a fainting episode a few days ago. His ailment is something which I believe can push my studies in neuroalteration to a whole new level. Seeker is my priority patient. You could say that my career is in line with his health. The three accusers were shocked to find out of Seeker's connection with Charles. However, his ailment is very unique. I had no choice but to put Seeker through an experimental treatment which as of now is currently in effect. This treatment, however, requires Zeke to frequently produce adrenaline. However, doing physically strenuous activities or any physically stimulating means to push his brain to pump adrenaline may further damage his health. Charles pointed to Seeker's thin frame. Still too soon in calling him Zeke? Charles, Merrill commented. Anyway, Charles sighed. We realized that gambling would be a good way to constantly let Seeker's brain. Charles paused and glanced over the approving nods of Merrill and Lind. To constantly let Seeker's brain pump adrenaline. It's a mental exercise, but the excitement and stress are real. So I funded his initial capital for his streaming, which surprisingly turned out to be very popular. Charles summarized. I have deemed Seeker fit for school provided he can constantly produce adrenaline every day. Even now, his progressing recovery has aided my studies greatly. The three accusers stared blankly. The thoughts of Alian and Jonathan were in chaos. There was actually a legitimate medical excuse for Seeker to gamble? They could not contest that. He was a world-renowned doctor. Who would go against his claims? Ted's mind was in shock. Seeker had the right to gamble thousands of Sidians just like that? And no one should judge or reprimand him? Why don't you give Seeker an excuse for stealing while you're at it? Or make him medically approved to be an exhibitionist? Honestly, Seeker could occasionally attempt to steal and run away from people, or run around naked to make his brain pump adrenaline, but I'm sure you wouldn't like that. Charles joked. What the hell? That was really an option? The thoughts of the three were in a mess now. They thought they could bully this poor group of rising students, but now had to curve to their actions. Ted was looking very grim. His intended payback was now in shambles. He stared at the video and realized something. Miss, he jolted and pointed to the phone. Alian almost dropped Ted's phone due to the surprise, so she immediately gripped it. As she did, she saw the video. There it was, Merrill and Lind within plain view of the camera struggling with the remote and wallet. But it was their attire that gave Alian an enlightening idea. Alian smiled. Her quick thinking and being a natural scammer was aiding her. She regained her composure. Dr. Charles, while we can naturally allow Seeker this excuse as per your recommendation, we fear that the school will receive negative feedback from the community at large. How is that? Charles asked. He was starting to get impatient from this troop. It wasn't difficult for him to piece the puzzle of their aim to discredit Seeker. If Seeker is allowed to continue in his gambling spree, it might raise several questions from parents, especially if it appears that the school itself is supporting Seeker's gambling tendencies. After all, we are all well aware of how much Seeker has earned. With Seeker raking up that amount of money, it will naturally invite trouble. Charles glared impatiently at the teacher. His earnings are due to his skill. I've watched the stream from beginning to end. I can assure you that the game and its connected communities are not like the ones in casinos which propagate gambling. They all challenge Seeker to pursue a certain task and offers Seeker a prize if Seeker accomplishes it. Nevertheless, parents will be concerned. People already know that Seeker studies here. After all, Merrill and Lind appeared wearing their school uniforms in this video. Alian smiled. He turned the phone displaying Merrill and Lind standing in the frame. Lind and Merrill had grave looks. They could not deny that accusation. So, we cannot escape the public's knowledge and connection to this school. So how about this? We make Seeker stream a legitimate fundraising program for the school. That way we can provide a justified stand alongside you. Seeker looked angry. His casual and uncaring look finally changed. And I presume that I am to return a percentage to the school? Of course. School rules. Seeker, you are to give 20% of whatever you earn in your stream. Alian smiled. At the same time, the flustered principal also smiled. No, Seeker will be earning millions of credits soon, and we are supposed to give you 20%? Merrill erupted in anger once more. This was a robbery. They were attempting to expel Seeker, and now they're making money out of him. I agree. That sounds like robbery or blackmail. Charles answered gravely. Millions? What an exaggeration. But of course, I'm not the expert here. It will be very beneficial. You could support the school, allow your alma mater to be a part of a very anticipating study, and even earn money. Surely that is not a problem. Alian's smile grew wider. And if we refuse this proposal and let Dr. Charles appear in my stream independently? Seeker glared. You may do that, but to be on the safe side, we will expel you. As you know, my father, General Cyprill, is fairly strict in terms of gambling policies. He may pursue to shut you down. But if you are under the school's umbrella, he will recognize my allegiance towards your campaign and may even support it. Allianz spoke as if she was contemplating a dire dilemma. So basically, you will have your father to shut us down if Charles is to appear independently on my streams. But you will allow me to continue with my stream if we make this a school fundraising program. Seeker was not entertained. Jonathan smiled wickedly as well. That is correct. Think of how this may affect the school. If we promote it as a fundraising program, various institutes may even help you. This is a win-win situation. This is blackmail. Charles was even angrier. How could someone like these two be teachers? Dr. Charles, you have to understand. Seeker's identity is already out. Even right now, the students outside are undoubtedly posting pictures and post online about Seeker. Also, they are already aware of your connection with him, especially since you have visited this school. If word gets out that gambling can be a cure for whatever Seeker is going through, it would probably be used in the wrong context and my father may pursue it as well. Ultimately, it may damage your own reputation, Seeker's reputation, and this school's reputation. Surely you don't want that, right? It was one thing to blackmail Seeker, but to blackmail a national hero? Seeker sighed. I can't believe that an unbecoming person like me would be outsmarted by you, Miss Serple. Seeker's eyes were full of rage. Zeke? Meryl was surprised at Seeker's reaction. Sorry, Charles. I underestimated her resourcefulness. We are caught in a corner. I can't leave school now. It may seem selfish, but I have plans to make my parents proud through my studying. And you, Mississippi? Seeker turned to Alian. Genius. You really are a genius. Even I have to admire your control and quick turn of the situation. I thought I got this in the bag, but we would be risking too many things if we would deny your request. Seeker sighed once more. So does that mean that you accept our proposal? Seeker turned around and paced towards the entrance of the door. Of course not. I can't afford wasting 20% of my money to you guys. You're insane to think if we agree. Click. Seeker locked the door. Charles, sit down, Seeker said as he drew a chair closer to Charles. Charles immediately sat down as Seeker was forcing the chair on his back. What are you doing? Jonathan stared in confusion. I'm about to do the simplest method on how to resolve conflicts such as these. Seeker smiled. Charles, who was sitting down, immediately felt a sudden shock of emotions. Intense fear gripped him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't even stand. The three accusers felt the same strength-paralyzing fear. Alian was the first target. Pow! An intense punch was delivered to her stomach. Alian, who already couldn't breathe, felt as if her stomach blown to bits. Before she could fall down, Seeker grabbed her by the hair and smashed her pretty face to the ground. Smash! If you can't beat them, pulverize them. Seeker's devilish grin appeared once more. Chapter 23. Save the World Club. The sudden attack was swift, decisive, and brutal. Alian Cyprill laid unconscious with her face hard pressed on the floor. Jonathan and Ted wanted to shout, but an unusual terror filled their heart, causing to be unable to even breathe, much less shout. Seeker smiled and took his time. He slowly walked towards Ted as he was cracking his fist. Ted wanted to move, but every step that Seeker took laid an intense burden over his entire body. Seeker stood right in front of Ted and stared him straight in the eye. You know, I've always wanted to do this to a royal. Never got the chance, though. Seeker's devilish grin grew wider. Who said hopes and dreams could not be achieved? Seeker was about to succeed in doing one of the most abominable things he wanted to do in his past life. Seeker started with the stomach. His punch dove deep within Ted's stomach, as if it was about to pierce through it. Ted vomited a lot of saliva at the immense punch. His consciousness was leaving him, but before his spirit could leave, another smashing sensation vibrated on his jaw. Seeker continued with another power hook, which spun Ted's world. A tooth flew out of his mouth. He crashed down to the ground with saliva and blood spilling out of his mouth. Principal Decker. Seeker grinned as he approached the last person who wanted to condemn him. Jonathan was shivering and lost his strength to stand. As he was stumbling over in fear, Seeker jumped, grabbed his head and smashed it on the nearby desk. Smash! 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 The three were now unconscious. That felt good. Seeker exclaimed happily as he held on Jonathan's head. Meryl and Lind were shocked at the development. Their mouths were wide open. Charles was now gasping for air. A mix of emotions filled his heart. The recovering state of his mind from the intense fear that Seeker created, the surprise and confusion of Seeker's sudden attack, and his frustration on Seeker's claim about Meryl and Lind. "What the hell, Zeke?" Meryl cried in surprise. Lind immediately rushed for their beloved homeroom teacher. Her once flawless face was smashed on the floor. Blood was oozing out of her mouth. The thin-framed glasses were bent in an odd fashion. "What the hell are you doing?" Meryl demanded angrily. Taking care of the problem, Seeker grinned as he was smashing Principal's face on the surface of the table. "Seeker, Charles," he called out. The sudden shock of fear remained as his hands were shivering, but he tried to remain calm. "I don't think that violence is the best way to stop slamming your principal's face," Charles shouted as Seeker seemed to be having fun. All right, calm down, will you?" Seeker allowed Jonathan's body to slide down the table and onto the floor. "What the hell happened to keep your actions low-key to not change the future? That went down the drain the moment she tried to blackmail me." Seeker shrugged. "Do you realize the possible consequences of what you have done? Relax. Everything's fine. That's what you told me last night, and we almost got blackmailed by your homeroom teacher," Charles complained. Okay. So I miscalculated. I know my actions may seem drastic, but I really had no choice. I can't afford to give them 20% of our cash. Besides, everything is within the scope of manageable control. Zeke, please explain how smashing our principal's face on the table is within a scope of manageable control. Meryl was also flustered. Lind also had a pleading look to make Seeker explain. "All right, let me explain. As I said earlier, we really didn't have a choice. We need to earn as fast as we can. I originally wanted to continue this little game of intrigue and keep it as low-key as possible, but they pushed me over the limit. Have you noticed how Principal Decker was supporting Miss Cipral? It's clear indication that General Cipral's drug connection in this school is very strong." "Yeah, the moment we entered his office, Principal Decker would just go and do whatever Miss Cipral would say," Lind contemplated. "That's right. There is something strange about this school. I have a feeling that General Cipral's not just selling drugs here. I believe that this school is the main base of his drug operation," Seeker declared solemnly. "What?" The three chorused. "All things will be made clear soon. For now, we have to interrogate them. So here's what we need to do. Charles and I will go outside and hold a meet and greet. We can gather every student to get to the auditorium hall. Meryl, stay here and make sure no one gets in aside from us. You have to tie these three and gag them in case they wake up. Lind, look for Cliff. You two sneak out and get his car. Drive here and carry these three to the car discreetly. Have him drive straight to the duplex and wait for us there." Lind's face was flushed white. "Why does it feel like we're trying to get away from murder?" Meryl sighed. "Charles, I'll go out first. There are teachers outside. Let me deal with them. Give me about 5 minutes. When you say, deal with them, you mean? Talk with them, Charles. Why would I go out and start beating everyone in school?" Seeker gave a sarcastic stare. "Just making sure that we are on the right page." Charles sighed in relief. "For now, you guys tie up and gag these three." Meryl went straight and used the various duct tapes that were lying around in the office to tie up and gag the three. Lind and Charles helped her. Seeker slowly opened the door and swiftly went out, not giving the outsiders any chance to see what was going on inside. There were several teachers waiting. Before any of them got to voice out their concerns, Seeker spoke. "Sorry for the excitement, guys. We were so excited about the news that they were stomping and clapping inside. As was proposed by Principal Decker, Dr. Charles has agreed to hold several lectures and talks here, and will temporarily be an associate teacher in this school," Seeker announced with great joy. There was immediate applause once the crowd heard that. "They are still working over the details, but Principal Decker asked me to inform you to suspend the remaining classes this afternoon. Everyone is to gather in the main auditorium for a quick meet and greet with Dr. Charles. He will also be explaining his partnership with this school, as well as the experimental studies he currently handling," Seeker excitedly announced. The teachers applauded once more. No one bothered with the strange sounds they heard earlier and immediately started to rush in order to organize the sudden event. Seeker returned inside once the teachers left. Oh yeah, Charles, cancel whatever appointments you have for the next 3 days. I told everyone you were going to be an associate teacher at this school. Later, give a short talk on how you are helping me recover and ask the school for support. Act under the pretense that we are going to follow Miss Cipral's suggestion. What? Didn't you just smash your teacher's face on the ground because you didn't want to go with that, and now you want me to announce that we're going to make it official? I didn't want to give them 20% of my earnings, but the benefits they mention are tempting, so we're going with it. Obviously, we won't be giving them the money. Seeker grinned. Lind, be careful that no one else will see you. All right, guys, time is of the essence. Let's move out. Seeker commanded. There was excitement in the school. A chance to meet and talk to one of the most famous personalities on Earth was something that not even a school as prestigious as theirs could afford. Everyone was rushing to the main auditorium. Cliff. Lind chased the said student who was walking towards the auditorium. The group staggered and stared in fear towards this gentle giant. Well, what do you want? He said that I have until the end of the week. I'm working on it. Give me more time. Young Cliff pleaded with his life. Lind gave a depressed smile. Since when did he become a dangerous thug who would kill without batting an eye? Change of plans. I don't think you need to do that anymore. Anyway, we need to get your car. Cliff had a scared expression as he looked with pleading eyes to his gang. His gang dared not help him. There was something they feared more than their leader. The wounds in their body haven't even healed yet. These painful sores were a fearful reminder of the man Lind Indigo called friend. Cliff slowly walked towards Lind, indicating his intent to follow Lind's orders. After taking a quick detour to the parking lot, the two drove towards the building where the principal's office was. The two walked upstairs. As they reached the door, Charles had a contemplating look and gazed at Cliff as he was staring at the most pitiful person on the planet. What am I here for? Cliff asked hesitantly. I feel sorry for you. Lind shook his head. Well, what? I'm sorry, Cliff. Once I open the door, you have no choice but to help us. He will kill you if you back away now. Lind immediately swung the door wide open. There sat three of the school's most respected figures, gagged up, wounded, and unconscious. Meryl had a sheet of cloth which she was trying to wrap around Alion. What are you doing? Lind reacted. Nothing dangerous, Lind. Why are you worried? After everything she's done to us, you're still holding on your little attraction towards her? Disgusting. While the two friends were bickering with Lind shouting in the negatory, Cliff's brain melted, and he started to feel that everything was wrong in this world. He knew Seeker was a demon, but now he realized that his two friends weren't any angels either. Oh man, no, I don't want anything to do with this. Cliff stumbled backward as what he saw terrified him. Great fear filled his heart. He'll kill you if you back out now. You know too much. Meryl took the initiative and stated the fact. Cliff stumbled once more at that statement. He turned around and pleaded with Meryl. Wait, man. I don't want to be a part of this. Please let me go. Please, Daff. Seeker will kill you if you run. You should have backed out earlier when you had the chance. Cliff started sobbing. He wanted to complain but knew that these two would only make things more difficult if he did. Now enough whining. These three are still alive. Let's get them to the car and get out of school while no one's here to notice it. Cliff turned to Lind. Maybe this gentle giant would pity him and allow him to return to his normal delinquent life. Welcome to Seeker's Save the World Club, Lind announced with a pitying smile. Chapter 24. The School's Secret. A confident and unmatched figure stood on the stage. His eyes stared softly, as if he was the most tender man alive. But his huge and well-built frame showed power, strength, and might. Adding to this was the medical reputation that caused the world to turn to him. He is Dr. Charles Lindmet, model, actor, world-renowned doctor, and a nominated candidate for the Pangea Nation's Heroes of Today. As you all know, Seeker Carlean had an intense migraine attack a few days back. I handled the case and discovered a new type of neurological disorder where Seeker's brain is in constant regeneration and degeneration. It caused quite a panic at the hospital. However, after undergoing experimental treatment, Seeker health started to stabilize. This treatment, however, requires Seeker to constantly produce adrenaline on a daily basis. Charles already had the charisma of a superstar, and with the eloquence of a doctor in his speech, it simply drew listeners like moths to a flame. As such, dear friends, I have approached Principal Decker and discussed Seeker's condition. Some of you may be familiar with an online stream that Seeker has been hosting in the past 2 days. In fact, it has caused quite a sensation. You may remember that Seeker has participated in several transactions that some of you may consider being gambling. I appeal to everyone in this school to see this in a different light. Charles smiled and walked over towards Seeker. They stood on the high stage, which everyone continued to observe with great passion. Seeker is gambling because he needs to pump adrenaline. The excitement, the thrill, the adversity, and the stress of putting money on the line allows this to happen. You may ask, then, why gambling? Are there not other means to accomplish such an event? I have concluded that though physically strenuous activities may induce his brain to pump, it may ultimately damage his brain and health. We do not know what possible side effects that may spring out if we pursue this route, especially when he is taking a variety of medication. Also, given Seeker's small frame, he may not be able to do this on a daily basis. Several students who experienced the weakness of Seeker's thin and small frame smiled wryly. This small frame of his was lifting their bodies and tossed them around as if they were pillows. Of course, I could allow Seeker to run around naked or pilfer items from his classmates every now and then, but I'm sure many may not enjoy this. Charles grinned. The audience laughed and applauded. Somehow, a seemingly innocent statement when delivered by this man transformed into a memorable punchline. The necessity of his gambling was an experiment which delivered great success in aiding his recovery as well as my studies. Charles patted Seeker in the shoulder. So I ask everyone to not view his acts as evil. Principal Decker has shown nothing but the best of support when we hammered and laid the details on him and on his table. He will support Seeker in his recovery and me in my research. Thank you so much for your understanding and cooperation. Let history be made today, Charles announced happily. The school was ecstatic. People were clapping and rejoicing. History was indeed made. The media club made sure to record the entirety of the speech. In fact, they made a lot of money when several news channels arrived later. Charles met and took pictures with several of his fans, and when all was said and done, Seeker and Charles soon walked out of school. The news started to circulate online and shocked both the medical and the gaming world. People started to talk about the latest developments of Charles's neuroalteration program, while the gaming world was shocked to see that Seeker had such a supporter. Even non-gamers started to watch Seeker's trend. Even while the talk was happening, the photos that the students posted were already flooding the internet. While all of this was happening, a group of 3 students was busy dragging 3 unconscious bodies through the garage at the back of the duplex. You sure no one saw us? Meryl asked worriedly. I'm sure. I've checked again and again. No one's in the vicinity. It's a good thing that this duplex is on the outskirts of the city. Cliff, you did a good job, Lynn commended. The 3rd student was sitting down in the couch, drained of all life. It was an adrenaline-pumping hour. They were driving all over the city in an attempt to shake off imaginary pursuers and waiting for nearly an hour outside of Charles' duplex to make sure the coast was clear. And during this entire time, they kept checking if any of the 3 were awake or were feigning unconsciousness. Eventually, after much bickering, they finally got the courage to quickly drag the bodies inside. The 3 bodies they dragged were now tied up in a chair with an excessive amount of ropes and duct tapes around them. Their mouths were gagged excessively. Duct tapes over cloths, over duct tapes. It was clear that the 3 were amateurs to these sorts of things. Meryl looked at the 3 figures. She laughed. Lind gave a strange glance at her. Sorry, it's just, Seeker promised us to keep us out of dangerous situations, but look where we are right now. We've beaten up and kidnapped 3 people. Ted, whose father is a major business mogul, Miss Ciprel, the daughter of a general who has God knows what kind of connections, and there's Principal Decker. Meryl sighed. What about Principal Decker? Cliff interrupted the conversation with a worried look. The reality of the titles that his victims carried scared him. Nothing scary. He's just a scared principal caught in the cobwebs of what possibly could be a very scandalous drug trade in the entire history of drug trades ever. Meryl sighed. She went off to get herself a drink from the refrigerator. What exactly is going on? Cliff finally demanded. I put through everything you said because you said Seeker would kill me, but it looks like I'm going to die anyway. Cliff started to complain angrily. MMMMHHHHH. A groaning sound was heard. Cliff and Lynn jolted in surprise and turned to find Alion Ciprel struggling to break free. Quick, Hit her, Meryl shouted. What? I can't do that, Lind retorted. Oh, for crying out loud, Lind. Get over this stupid attraction you have for our damn teacher and smack her. Cliff, you do it. Hell no. You still haven't explained to me what exactly is going on. Just hit her, or I'll ask Zeke to kill you. Meryl gave an irritated reply. Meryl scoffed, seeing his hesitation, and paced for Alion. Alion was squirming in fear. Relax, guys. I'm here. A voice called out, stopping Meryl. Seeker was walking inside the door. Seeker, thank God you're here. Meryl ran and gave Seeker a tight hug. Looks like Miss Cipral is awake. Good afternoon, miss. Seeker grinned. MHHHHHHHH. MHHHH. The struggling teacher tried her best to break free from her bindings, but it was to no avail. Looks like you went a bit overboard in the gagging of these three. Seeker chuckled. Just after chuckling, Seeker sudden sent a powerful punch to the stomach of Alion. Guh! Alion gasped underneath the duct tapes. Zeke! Lind couldn't help but cry. Seeker gave a surprised look at Lind. Even now, Lind? I thought you'd be over her after everything. Seeker sighed. Fine, I'll humor you. Looks like I'll have to exert other methods to make this beloved teacher of ours squeal. Seeker walked closer and turned to another youth. You two better find a seat, Seeker said as he looked at Cliff and Charles. He then walked back and stood in front of Ted. Alion, who was to Ted's right, was now struggling more intensely. All right, Mississippi, this is what's going to happen if you shout or make any noise. Seeker grinned. An empowering wave of fear was once again clutching the hearts of everyone except Meryl and Lind. It's happening again, Cliff exclaimed. Luckily, he was already seated down. He clutched the hand of Charles, who was also clutching back. At this moment, Seeker smiled and winked 2 times towards Meryl and Lind. After that, he pushed Ted's head upwards, revealing his neck, and Seeker then did a quick slash on Ted's neck. A bright red liquid splashed on Alion's face. At that moment, blood was trickling down of Ted's neck and the blade that Seeker held. Alion started to struggle and was shouting. Oh my God, Cliff shouted. The two clutched their hands all the tighter. Charles couldn't believe what he saw. MHHHHHH. MHHHH. Oh, so you still want to shout, huh? Guess I'll have to kill you too. Seeker smiled and pushed her head backward. Alion was struggling to keep her neck covered. At this moment, she gripped the handles of the chair to which she was tied to and bit her own tongue to stop screaming. Very good. Seeker smiled and patted her head. Lind, take Ted's body out to the back. We can't have him bleed here. Meryl, start recording. Lind immediately sprung and dragged the body out of sight, and Meryl ran to take a camera and focused it on Alion's face. Seeker used the knife to masterfully cut the excessive tapes on Alion's mouth, and he ripped the last piece of duct tapes to reveal Alion's mouth. Why are you doing this? Please stop. Alion was trembling in fear. You forced my hand, dear teacher. I would have loved to play the innocent and simple Seeker Carlean, but you really got greedy there. Now tell me, why the school? Don't play games with me, Mississippi. I could easily kill you and head over to your father and kill him. We know you are using the school as a front for selling drugs. What I want to know is how and why. Seeker playfully pointed the edge of the bloody knife on Alion's forehead. It has never been my hobbies to dismember stubborn hostages, especially ones that are as beautiful as you. Seeker smiled. The fear in Alion's heart continued to fester. The school is a perfect cover for selling drugs. Is that why you selected this school? A school in Phil Central would allow easier distribution of drugs across the nation, right? Seeker's deduction caused everyone to be surprised. Wait, the entire Philpangian nations? Charles exclaimed. Of course. His father's a general after all. He'd definitely be using this strategic position to attract buyers from the island north and south. At this moment, Seeker has undone his deathly aura. Alion, however, was still shivering in fear. Having a sharp, bloodied knife moving through her skin had already petrified her. Oh my God, you were right, Zeke, Lind exclaimed. Why a school, though? Seeker pressed his blade deeper into Alion's skin. She gripped the chair and closed her eyes. It's the safest place for my dad to conduct trades. No federal institution would think that a school would become the hub of the main cartels. People come and go to school, and no one would suspect anything. Alion finally confessed. The room was silent as she explained this. Behind the innocent facade of a growing school with high educational training, was a den of illegal drug trades. So it is as I suspected, Seeker commended. The students become the perfect courier, and some in this school could easily bypass most security. For example, any royal student. Seeker smiled. Am I correct, miss? The blade pushed hard at her chest.
Yes.
Is Ted's parents one of your biggest client?
Yes.
Alian gravely replied. Lind and Meryl stared gravely at each other. Their alma mater had such a dark secret. Wait a minute. If the school is a hub for the biggest drug trades in this nation, could it also be? Charles began as he recalled Seeker's initial discourse. You finally caught up, Charles. Yes. It's also a hub for the biggest human trafficking transactions in the Philpangean nations. Chapter 25. A Deal with the Devil. Ted was panicking when he woke up. At first, he thought he was bleeding but realized that it was ketchup. He couldn't move as there was an exaggerated amount of duct tapes tying him which could easily immobilize 3 full-grown adults. He glanced across the kitchen hoping to find anything which he could use to break free. It was clear that no one knew of his awakening. He struggled to move, but the chair which he was tied to was very stable, and no matter how he threw his weight around, the chair won't move. Are most royals involved in drug trafficking? A chillingly familiar voice was heard. Ted tried to clutch his bound fist to calm himself down. He couldn't see Seeker as he was positioned in the corner, out of view of the other people in the other room. Not all, but most of the top royals are. The status that they carry allows them to move around Philpangeia easily without being suspected of anything. Alian Cypril was pretty calm now. She no longer panicked or answered in fear as the interrogation continued. How do you get the drugs? It's hard to fathom how drugs could ever enter this country with its security detail. Charles spoke angrily. I've served in the military and I know how the measures are taken to ensure that no drug comes in. It's basically impossible to import drugs into this country. My dear Charles, remember what Sherlock Holmes would say? Eliminate the impossible, and all that's left, however improbable, must be the truth. Seeker imitated with a British accent. The reason why I believe the school is the central hub for distributing drugs is that it is the perfect place with the perfect hideout to develop these drugs. Seeker smiled. But Zeke, I've seen the news. The drugs that the government has managed to confiscate are all foreign-made. Meryl recalled several news reports. Think Meryl. General Cypril is part of the government. It would be easy for him to make such claims, and the government along with the masses will easily believe that these drugs were foreign-made. But let me ask you this, exactly how did they determine that it is foreign-made? Seeker smiled. I don't know. It was very technical when it was explained on TV. Exactly. Most won't bother to examine it. And people who might want to examine it would have to go against the array of experts that were paid to say it was foreign. Those people left with the guts to study it are weird people who spend their days reading conspiracy theories and the like. And these people are rarely taken seriously. So it really is made in school? Meryl was dismal. The school that she loved so much had such a background. It's the perfect cover. In fact, this secret never managed to reach the light even up to the Great Wars. Blaming foreigners for bringing drugs into this country served as a convenient claim, especially in this era, dubbed the Age of Distrustful Nations. By simply blaming foreign or international corporations, the ongoing bandwagon mentality of rage against foreigners easily pushes the general's secret agenda. Even if General Cypril produces a claim that the foreign corporations who are being blamed could prove wrong, who would the masses believe in? The foreigners who could cause another war, or the people in charge of defending this country? Meryl was silent. It really made sense. Who are you? Alian finally asked. How do you know all this? We were sure that no one could trace things back to me. I know. Bravo, Mississippi, bravo. Seeker applauded, leading the trails back to Professor Yun. Poor guy. He's your fall guy, correct? You probably have his kids kidnapped, or something of that extent. Hence, small-time drug dealers like little Cliffy here would point at the language professor interrogated. Cliff sat in shock. He knew drugs circulated in campus, but the reach was more than what he had expected. Who are you? Are you with the PUI? Alian had a calm demeanor as she asked. Seeker smiled and admired Alian's courage and adaptation to the situation. Let's just say I had a glimpse of the future and know these things, Mississippi. So let me check if I'm right. The school, under the great cause of education, would request the very ingredients necessary to make these drugs. Of course, to avoid suspicion, the ingredients are all provided by your loyal partners who coincidentally are the parents of many royal students. Alian nodded helplessly. Whoa, so the royals are all drug pushers? Lind was surprised. Was that royal girl who tried to flirt with him in on all this? Not all. It would be too suspicious, but I would say most of the prominent ones are. Seeker stared at Alian to confirm. Alian gave another helpless nod. Oh, Lind, kindly get Ted back here. He's awake. And Meryl, shut the recording. We've gotten enough from her confession. Alian was surprised. Wasn't Ted already dead? She stared at the room where Lind went off to. MMHHHHH. A muffled shout could be heard on the other room. Lind ran and dragged the bounded Ted back. He's alive. Charles was relieved. Of course, I never killed him. Seeker immediately went and punched Ted in the stomach. It looked very relaxed, however Seeker's fist was reaching deep into Ted's stomach. Alian felt as if her stomach pained as she recalled Seeker's harassment. But the blood! Cliff shouted in surprise. Seeker stood and slashed the knife and at the same time squeezed the sachets of ketchup which squirted out. It's a good thing that this particular brand appears very similar to blood. Seeker smiled. You tricked me. Alian shouted in anger. Oh, shut up, will you? Seeker suddenly delivered a powerful slap on Alian's unguarded face. Lind controlled his urge by clutching his fist. The fear along with the painful slap silenced the teacher once more. We have recorded every detail of our talk. Think of the headlines. Heroes of Today candidate, Dr. Lindmit, unmasks Pangea Nation's biggest drug cartel. Seeker motioned to form an imaginary banner. If this tape gets out, your father would be finished. The credibility of Charles isn't something to be underestimated. The media will kill your father, and the government will be forced to investigate it. Not to mention the unknown responses of all the corporations connected to your drug exchange. No matter what, your father's empire will easily crumble. Alian glared angrily at Seeker. I'm sure you know that the best course of action is to follow whatever I say. So you're not going to kill me? Nor do you seem to have any intentions of exposing my father. Then what is it that you want? Oh, goody good response. As expected with the general's daughter. Your calm bearing proves that you are more than a foot soldier in his schemes. I bet you're probably one of the big shots in your father's team. You're right. I have no intention of exposing your father. Wait, we're not going to expose them? Charles asked in surprise. Of course not. I did want to at first, though. Her family has always been a bane to mine. In fact, my dad had several close calls with General Cipral's goons. That's probably why you hate me. Right, Miss Cipral? Alian glared angrily. There have been occasions when Detective Chris Carlean meddled with their operations that it nearly exposed everything. Every time this would happen, Alian would then be tasked to fix it. You see, earlier today I realized that the general was cooking something big when good old Principal Decker here revealed his bias and fear towards Alian. I was sure he was connected. Seeker patted the unconscious principal. Principal Decker, you do realize that pretending to be unconscious won't work with me? Seeker whispered on Jonathan's ear. The latter could not help but shiver. However, he chose to continue in his exposed facade of pretending to be asleep. You see, when I realized that if Principal Decker himself was involved, then the drug trade in our school wasn't just an ordinary small-time branch which is used to sell drugs to students. Principal Decker's adamant reactions and decisiveness to immediately obey Miss Cipral's demand with blind faith indicated that they clearly had a boss-subordinate relationship. Alian glared angrily towards Jonathan. So he was the one who spilled the beans. So you had this hunch and decided to pound all three of them? Meryl asked in sarcasm. Of course not. I was sure of my guess. Miss Cipral's colorful experience was the last piece that allowed me to deduce their schemes. Let's review her life story. She has worked around the country, always accompanying her father to wherever island or region he is assigned to. She's a natural genius who even managed to attain her master's degree at the young age of 24. Yet despite all of these, why did she decide to work as a teacher in our school? She could have worked in the military. But no, she took a very drastic change in occupation. Seeker gave a scrutinizing stare at Alian. She had everything. The looks, the brains, the charisma, and capabilities. And once she masterfully countered my own schemes to legitimate my gambling crusade, I was thoroughly convinced that her father won't leave this talent unused for his empire. She's definitely a critical piece in his plans. So you figured that my father had something big going on in this school. Bravo. But who are you really? If you're not PUI, then what are you? I already told you. A kid who glanced the future. Seeker shrugged casually. After that, Seeker moved with incredible speed and slashed the duct tapes and ropes that bounded Alion's right hand. Alion was shivering in fear. The slash was so sudden and so close to her skin that she thought that her hand was halved along with the duct tapes. She immediately yanked her hand free from its bondage to the chair's armrest and quickly examined it. Monster! Alion gazed in fear. No ordinary human could pull this off. Even the soldiers she trained with did not have the same expert control that Seeker has handling a knife. A regular kitchen knife couldn't cleanly cut through layers of duct tape like that. And what was even more amazing, Seeker knew when to stop to leave the skin unscathed. She looked in fear at Seeker. The same chilling sensation returned. Her hands were shivering. She knew that Seeker could easily kill her. In fact, Seeker could probably easily handle most of the monsters that she has met in the course of accompanying his father. So, are you ready to listen? I don't enjoy having a deal with the devil, you know. The effort one must put is too taxing. What do you want from me? Not from you, Mississippi. From your father. I want to make him my money-making puppet. Seeker grinned evilly. Alion was shocked at Seeker's demand. So you're not only going to expose them, but you plan to actually take control of his empire? Cliff couldn't help but interject now. It was just too absurd. Just when he could calmly relax as he thought that Seeker was some sort of secret police spy sent to shut down a drug cartel, it turned out he was a worse hooligan who was greedier than the general. This is crazy. Cliff appealed to Charles. Oh right, that was the plan, huh? Charles sighed as he recalled the plan. Well, what? Brilliant, Zeke. Merrill commended. Cliff, however, was getting more frantic. I didn't expect that we could easily take control of a drug cartel this easily. Lynn smiled. The three were rejoicing. Their plans were quickly moving forward. Poor Cliff felt as if his world has ended. He had witnessed a deal made with the devil. But in Cliff's eyes, the devil was definitely not Alion Cipral. Chapter 26. Programmed Slaves. Three figures walked out of the car. They had several bandages wrapped around the different sides of their faces. Looks like this is goodbye for now. I won't say anything other than that if you betray us, your life and everyone around you will suffer. Charles smiled happily. Unlike his flustered and confused expressions earlier, there was now a suave of confidence and even joy. The car immediately sped off, leaving the three figures on the outskirts of the school grounds. What are we going to do now? Jonathan sighed. It was a nightmare. Who would have thought that their deep, dark secret would be easily exposed by a random rising student? Alion frowned and walked towards Ted. Pow! A power punch was delivered and dove deeply in Ted's stomach. The sudden attack left Ted unprepared to harden his muscles. He fell down and curled down like a ball. That's for convincing me to mess with Seeker. Alion glared at the boy and gave him another quick kick on the face. You two better not do anything idiotic in the next days. Our lives are at stake. My father would put all the blame on me if word gets out, and the three of us would definitely die. What? Surely the general won't dash. Alion quickly kicked Jonathan in the groin. Just like Ted, Jonathan lost the strength to stand and was kneeling as he was covering his genitals. That's for your poor acting. If not for you, Seeker wouldn't have deduced everything. You don't know my father. He'd trade me if he has something to gain. Why did you think I did everything to get where I am now? It's because I know what my father will do to me if I'm useless. Alion spoke angrily. Get up. Alion gave another kick to the two curling men. I'll talk to my father now. Decker, stop whatever operations we have in school now. Ted, contact all the royal reps and inform them that all operations are to be put on hold. The two forced themselves to stand up. The most they could manage was a bending stand. They, however, nodded and each went their own way. As the two departed, Alion sighed. She clutched her fist in frustration. Everything was ruined now. Who would die tonight? Will it be Ted or Decker? She could not help but fear even for her own life. She took out her phone and stared at it for a few minutes. She took a deep breath and called her father. The phone rang. She prayed to God that her father would not pick up. What is it? A cold voice sounded from the other end of the phone. Alion sighed. We need to talk. Something has happened. Back at the duplex, Seeker had just finished eating his dinner. He had his fill from the various delicacies that they ordered in 3 different restaurants. Of course, a majority of what they ordered was for Seeker. Cliff, who was invited to stay for dinner, was shocked at how Seeker devoured 3 different dishes from different restaurants. Lind sighed in envy. His stomach wasn't as strong as Seeker. He could only manage 1 dish. Meryl, on the other hand, had a disgusting look at Seeker's ungraceful act. Cliff had no appetite. He had lived a life of danger. He was always confident on himself, but right now someone who could even blackmail and beat up the biggest and most dangerous cartel in their country was right in front of him. "What do you want from me?" Cliff weakly asked. He had been asking Seeker this same question again and again, but Seeker kept ignoring him and munched on his gourmet. "I have a job for you and your gang. I want you to secretly corner and torture the following people." Seeker finally answered and handed Cliff a piece of paper. Cliff swallowed a mouthful of his saliva at the much-exaggerated request of his new owner. He took the paper and said nothing. He didn't have the will to even read the paper. Meryl took the paper and casually browsed on the names on the list. Lind was curiously peeking behind Meryl. "Zeke, why is everyone here an exchange student?" Meryl wondered. "It's connected to how the school is a hub for human trafficking." Seeker continued to munch an Asian dim sum. "Human trafficking? I thought even Alion didn't know much about her father's plan on that area." Meryl wondered. "Yeah, Zeke, that's the part which I don't get. Why hide it from her? I mean, Miss Cipral is pretty efficient." "Is she pretty efficient? Or just pretty?" Seeker teased. Lind blushed and quickly brushed it off. "I'm serious, Zeke. Could there be someone else in school with Miss Cipral's authority and command?" "No. You have to take into account the general's personality. You see, he views his daughter as a good chess piece, but at the same time, he fears her greatly. If her command and authority rise to a level that can pose a threat to him, then he would kill her. A general who is this paranoid and went to great lengths to hide his empire is someone who doesn't want to share in power. Why would this have anything to do with human trafficking?" Actually, I knew a tiny portion of this from my memories of the future. But after connecting the dots, I realized that I had greatly underestimated the power and reach that this general has. It looks like he would play quite a dangerous role in the future. One reason why the future was bleak was the abundance of traitors who managed to creep its way in our ranks. But later, we found out that they weren't just spies. They were slaves. It was later revealed that they were a product of a new form of human trafficking. A new form? It's pretty complicated. As you know, this era hates human trafficking with a vengeance. Countries even collapsed when they found out their leaders were involved in this. You might remember the revolutions in one China and India. So, Lind asked curiously, "Well, this world has an intense need for sexual labor, but it's almost impossible to do so today. So a new form of human trafficking that only a very small percentage of the world knows about was developed. Instead of taking or abducting someone and force them to do labor or sexual acts and leave them with no identity, they took a whole new approach." "How?" Meryl's interest was now piqued. What other forms of human trafficking could there possibly be? Selling people with identities. Meaning these people have jobs, career, and sometimes even a family. This is extremely costly to do, but this is also extremely profitable if you do manage it. People as rich as General Cipral are now using people with identity and selling them off as slaves. These new slaves are almost untraceable. Slaves with jobs? I can't imagine that. All right, let's take a look at the list. Are there anyone on this list that you particularly find attractive? Seeker asked Lind. Seeker frowned and turned to Cliff. You Cliff. I doubt Lind would have an answer to that unless Miss Cipral is in this list. Meryl laughed while Lind was cursing. Cliff, who was surprised at the sudden question, jolted up and was panicking. "Boy, he's really scared of you, huh?" Meryl giggled. Seeker smiled but was sighing inside. "You should be scared of me too, Meryl, but my pressure's doing nothing to you." Seeker complained in his head. "This one." Cliff pointed on a name. "Oh, good pick. Eva Ivanov's smart and beautiful." Meryl smiled. She was good friends with this person. "Wait, Zeke, why is she in this list? And why are you asking Cliff to beat her up?" Meryl angrily complained. "I hope I'm wrong, but she's probably one of these slaves. You see, General Cyprill is very paranoid. So I calculated that he wouldn't dare make slaves in this country. My guess is that they abduct people from different countries, make the necessary implants, and use the school's exchange program to make these slaves willingly go here. No one will suspect anything that way. How will they do that? What do you mean make the slaves go here willingly? Let me explain the process of how they do it. They implant two devices in a person's body, one implanted near their hearts. This chip can cause a heart attack should the person controlling it wishes to. The three was surprised at this revelation. The first chip is meant to provide the threat of death. If an implanted slave disobeys the owner, he or she could die at a flip of the button. The second chip is implanted in the brain, and this chip is far more insidious than the first one. This chip is programmed to emit something that induces the brain to release several hormones that make the slave extremely happy. It's very interesting. At a push of a button, a slave will biologically reach the highest state of happiness possible. The three stared in confusion. Why make a slave happy? Think. A programmed servant is a slave who would willingly and happily serve his or her owner. This slave would do anything that the owner wishes because it not only keeps them alive, but makes them happy. That's why I selected the most beautiful and handsome exchange students on campus. They are the most probable candidates to be slaves. It makes no sense for the general to create a slave for political reasons or make them a spy. I'm sure the government is not involved in this. So these are probably high-end sex slaves. Exclusively yours, exclusively for your bidding. And worst of all, these slaves are extremely happy if they serve you, Seeker explained. I see. The owners could marry these programmed servants as they make best husbands and wives. Meryl sighed. Of course. The slave would probably be happier if they get married. You see, no matter how dignified a man or woman is, if perfect happiness is easily achieved through pleasing, or in this case, sexually pleasing their partners, then they would probably do it to their best. After all, a simple switch and they are in heaven, and everyone in this list could be one of them. Lynn sat silently and had a disgusted look. Meryl, on the other hand, could not resist but make a pun. So to them, the root word of happiness is no longer happy, but it becomes pinus, right? Meryl chuckled. Seeker and Lynn stared in shock at how Meryl was reacting. She was a woman after all, and she found this funny? Oh, don't give me that look. We have you, Zeke. You'd surely fix this. Still, it sounds like the perfect false religion, and the owner becomes a false god to these slaves. Death and joy in the hands of this owner. Such a dreadful combination. So why do you want me to beat up these folks? Cliff, who was silent the entire time, suddenly spoke. The reason why I want you to beat them up is to verify which is one of in this list are programmed slaves. One slave would cost millions of Sidians. General Cyprill can't afford to lose these slaves now. If they are programmed slaves and you beat them up, General Cyprill will immediately ensure that these people are treated with the best treatment. Since I can't find the trail through Alion, then I'll find these slaves through this method. Seeker grinned with his trademark devilish smile. Cliff nodded. Looks like there were dignity and honor in his quest. He took the list back and could not help but gaze at Eva's name once more. He didn't know her, but he didn't like the idea that such a beautiful student to become a sex slave. Then his thoughts drifted to an idea. If he was the owner of Eva then, Seeker stood up and stretched. Time for the stream, guys. Let's go. I won't see you out, Cliff. Seeker walked out of the table and paced towards the stairs. I can't wait to be the owner of these slaves. Think of the possibilities. Seeker shouted with intense anticipation. He was even happily skipping up the stairs like a little joyful girl. It took a few seconds for the people remaining to analyze what Seeker had just said. What? The three chorused. Chapter 27. Reaper's Breath. What do I need to know about this student? A tall and dark man stood as he watched a stream through a huge TV. He was not entertained and had a very strict stare towards his daughter. That is Seeker Carlean, a rising student in school. Alion stood at the corner of the room. She was trying to hide her shaking hands as she nervously reported. General Cyprill was a giant compared to the rest of the natives in the Pangean nations. He stood nearly at 7 feet tall and had a large and sturdy build. His arms were almost twice as huge as most men. He had a glass eye on his left and what appeared to be a burn scar. His temperance was strict and silent, so he's able to earn quite a bit through his stream. Why do I need to pay attention to him? General, let me begin with my plans. His earning potential could reach about 10% of our monthly income if pushed to the limits. That game he's playing has about 1 billion fans. Almost everyone who plays video games knows about that, and he is expected to be a record winner. That garnered my interest. I tried to, persuade him into tying up with our school, but apparently, his connections are not to be underestimated. I recently discovered that he is connected with Dr. Charles Lindmet, the hero doctor. I'll admit that this is a formidable connection, but General, he isn't just connected to the hero doctor, but I believe that the hero doctor is his subordinate. Dr. Lindmet is known for his rare appearances and his crazed focus on his research. But the impression that I got from how they interacted is that Dr. Lindmet is someone who Seeker can order around. The left brow of the general was raised. It was the first time that he was intrigued by this figure. So you tried to take advantage of his background and money-making capabilities. But I take it you failed as you are here now. The general's tone was very calm, but a surging disappointment could be felt. I didn't just fail. We were talking in the Principal Decker's office along with Ted Zircon. He knocked all 3 of us unconscious and interrogated us about our operations. He used some strange form of the drug that made us all incredibly afraid. It was a numb daff. Bang. Alian felt the pressure of the bullet pass by her hair. The sudden trigger was shocking, but Alian only frowned. You still aren't easily scared. Are you telling me that he has a drug that managed to turn you into a pitiful creature? That out of all the things he could have used to force you to confess, he used fear? The general's eyes remained calm and relaxed as ever. Yes. As I was saying before you rudely interrupted me, it was no use. The fear made me shiver, and I even confessed a bit when I panicked. After realizing how this fear could easily get Jonathan and Ted to squeal, I took advantage and confessed to some things that we could afford to reveal. Which organization is he working with? General stood up with an indifferent face and walked towards a small table full of liquors and glasses. I don't know. He acted as if he was working alone. What did you tell him? I didn't tell him anything. He deduced everything. He was merely asking me to confirm his suspicions. The general frowned again. How? He already knew I was involved in selling drugs. He had one of the small-time pushers working for him, Cliff Fongwood, if I remember. He deduced everything from our reactions, my career, and even taking into account your personality. But I do not know exactly how much he knows. The general was silently pouring himself wine. He took a sip and walked nearer to Alian. What are his demands? To meet with you. He has a business proposal. Not interested. Kill him. The general turned around and started walking when Alian sighed. He was asking for something about the human trafficking operations in this country. He said that you were probably using the school for its main hub as well as the drug operations. The general stopped. He turned around and gave an indifferent stare at his daughter. He took another sip and placed the glass on a nearby table. The general suddenly moved towards Alian and aimed a powerful straight punch towards her stomach. Alian immediately used her 2 hands to cover her stomach. The punch forced Alian backward. She could barely maintain her balance, and it felt as if her forearms were fractured from the punch. The general's eyes suddenly glared and gave Alian a strong right hook to the face. Pow! Alian stumbled back and spat out blood. The general continued to glare angrily at her daughter. Apologies, General. Seeker has already punched me twice in that area. I could not afford another hit. Alian stood up and wiped off the blood trickling down her mouth. The glare subsided, and the general walked and took another sip from the glass. Looks like you've caused quite a problem for me. The general remained to look indifferent, but there was some anger in his voice. Now, what to do? The best option is to kill you 3. Whatever evidences he has is only related to you 3. What do you have to say to that suggestion? Alian started to rummage on her purse that she placed on a nearby table. Seeker said that if things start to get out of hand, that I'd open this in front of you. Alian pulled out a small glass tube that was shut tight. The glass tube was empty. The general gave a curious stare at the test tube. Alian opened it. Crash. The 2 individuals in the room stumbled as a paralyzing fear filled the room. Alian dropped face front, while the general barely managed to keep one leg firmly rooted as he knelt to the ground. The indifferent face disappeared. He now wore a face that could only be displayed in extreme terror. Alian was gasping for air but had difficulty in breathing. Soon the paralyzing sensation started to disappear as the two managed to slowly regain control of their bodies. Alian was shivering. She was slowly lifting herself up. It wasn't a drug. It was Seeker. Oh my God. It was Seeker's breath. She couldn't believe it. Alian, Harker shouted angrily. The once indifferent and calm temperament was now replaced with an angry and impatient attitude. What happened? Harker growled. Seeker. He did that. It was the same drug that I told you about, but that one was more terrifying than the one I felt. She continued to gasp for breath as she slowly stood up and leaned on the wall. What did he put into that tube? It was empty. I was sure it was. He took it and blew into that glass and immediately closed it. His breath? The general frowned and slowly walked towards Alian and picked up the glass tube. He stared at it cautiously. He held it close and took a whiff at the insides of the tube. The moment Harker inhaled the remaining air that was locked inside the test tube, his mind went blank. Harker suddenly gripped tightly, and the glass tube shattered. He almost lost his balance, but Alian managed to catch him as he fell. Harker was gasping for breath. Great fear fell into Alian's heart. It was the first time he ever saw his father this afraid. She held her up tightly and waited until he could stand on his own. Moments later, Harker's breathing stabilized and he stood up and stared at the glass tube. He wiped the blood on his wounded palm and went to drink all the wine in the glass nearby. It wasn't enough. He never experienced fear or helplessness of this level in his entire life. He walked towards the wine table and started to concoct a drink for himself. His mind, however, was still processing everything that he has experienced. How could that be a teenager's breath? He was certain that whatever he sniffed was the cause of his fear. He kept looking at Alian and took note of her flustered and shocked expression. She was telling the truth. Harker clutched his fist. That was a reaper's breath. The moment he sniffed the breath, he thought he would die. What kind of man is this Seeker Carlean? What trickery did he use? Was this a new form of biological warfare? Bad breath, which was so horrible that it could paralyze two individuals who were usually fearless? He started drinking and soon managed to calm his shaken form. I'll agree to the meeting. Get out, the general calmly ordered. Alian walked out of the room and sighed as she closed the door. I guess I have to thank Seeker for this. Alian sighed and started to walk home. Back at the duplex, Cliff was struggling to control his excitement. Seeker earned over 25,000 credits from his viewers alone. There were several factors to why his earnings managed to reach this level. Once news of Seeker and Dr. Linemit's collaboration with Seeker came to light, it immediately reached national news. Several people who were interested in Seeker despite not being a gamer decided to watch the stream and even paid for it. Then suddenly a celebrity gamer joined the stream. Please, Seeker, am I not good enough? Join us. I'd even let me take me out on a date. This feminine voice chuckled as she spoke teasingly. For the first time, Seeker allowed a third party to join in through a video call. Carrying one of the most famous usernames in the gaming world, Lord Choke Me Senpai joined their call. Seeker grinned. This was yet another time for him to make easy money from gambling. Tempting offer. Christine. Can I call you Christine? Seeker smiled once more. If you join us, you'd have the chance to call me Bae. Christine smiled. The chat room was exploding. Christine Scythia was a beauty that could match superstars and models. Her trademark pink hair was a sensation amongst gamers. Among all the existing pro steamers on Earth, it was without a doubt that Christine Scythia was the highest compensated. Not only was she beautiful, but her skills in piercing managed to get her to join the Piercing Battle Arena's official team, which represented the Pangaean nations, the Covenant of the Strongest. In fact, right at the background of Christine's video was the Covenant's official banner. The fact that this world-renowned gamer was flirting with Seeker and seducing him to join the stream spoke miles for Seeker's true worth. The chat room was in chaos. People were cursing in jealousy, attempting to get Christine's attention. No one could call Christine by her name. Everyone usually referred to her by her famous game handle. That is a very tempting offer. However, Christine, I might sound arrogant, but I know for a fact that I'm better than you. Too bad the Piercing Bullet Battle Arena hasn't been released yet. I can't prove my worth. Seeker sighed. Christine wasn't flustered or angry at Seeker's claim. In fact, a part of her believed Seeker's claim. Oh, I know that, Zeke. Is it all right to call you Zeke? I heard that that's what your two friends call you. Christine smiled. Of course, that sounds even more intimate. Seeker grinned devilishly. On a high-tech laboratory, Charles was cursing at how easy it was for a beautiful girl to call Seeker Zeke. Look, Zeke, we want you to join our team. Even Danny wants you on our team. Come on. You are a Pangean native. Isn't it patriotic for you to join and represent your country like that? As I said, I will only join if I get at least the same compensation that Precision is getting. Seeker smiled. Oh, you were serious? Quite a bold demand, Zeke. Even I wouldn't dare to make that demand. Christine smiled, but her eyes looked mockingly at Seeker. How about we make a bet, Chris? Seeker smiled. Let's bet that before this Sunday ends, your company will be offering me a salary that will either match or surpass Precision's. I am willing to bet 70,000 credits. Seeker smiled. Chapter 28. What just happened? The chat room exploded in surprise. This was a bold gamble. Although Seeker managed to earn a few thousand more credits through gambling with the newbies in the room, 70,000 amounted to almost all of his current earnings. 70,000 credits were enough money to purchase 2 new cars. This was not a gamble that you would do. Unlike his previous gambles, Seeker would bet with solely his skills on the line. Now he was betting something that involved the decision of other people. Who knew how the company which sponsored the Covenant of the Strongest would react? Christine had a curious look on her face. She was still smiling, but her surprise was clearly seen. Precision is not only their team leader, but he is the best player in the Covenant of the Strongest. He is a world-renowned player not only in piercing but several other games. Because of this, whoever held Precision held a paragon gamer of several famous competitive games. As such, his price was normally twice as much than other esport players. Even among those who could rival Precision in skill, none of them could rival his compensation. That's quite a bold gamble, Christine smiled. And I assume you'll be threatening us that you will join other teams? Christine controlled her face to not reveal the anger inside. This was quite an insult. Well, I can't promise that I would reserve myself for you. I am sure that by the time this Sunday ends, other international teams will be offering me that same pay. And of course, although I love my country, I can still represent it as an individual. Think about it. Let's say the team I join in, and will ultimately be the captain of, manages to steal the championship from you guys. It's a win-win for the country. A Pangean native would still hold the title. Seeker smirked. Christine's charming and pleasant attitude disappeared. She gazed straight at her screen and watched the casual glances that Seeker gave as he waited for her answer. Of course, despite glancing now and then to Christine, Seeker has yet to receive one hit from any enemies. You are very confident that they will rush to you. Well, I am pushing my luck. I estimate that I should be able to get an offer me that is at least twice of yours. However, it wouldn't be a gamble. Dr. Lindmit said to keep those adrenaline pumping. Having this threat of losing 70,000 credits for the next 2 days should do the trick. Seeker smiled. Christine frowned. If she was the world's most popular streamer, at the top of the esports paychecks were the best players of every country. Precision, who has successfully led the Covenant of the Strongest into 3 world championships in piercing and held several championships on other esport games, was the highest paid esport player in the world. The Prometheus of games was someone who could visit any country in their world, including the enemy countries of the Pangean nations. And Seeker claimed that before 4 days will pass, he will receive that compensation. Christine's eyes went wide, but a devilish smile appeared. So, let me get this straight. You want to gamble 70,000 credits that before Sunday ends, you will receive an offer that could reach twice of what I'm being paid at? So something that would match or top Precision's paycheck. That's right. And you won't join other teams during this period who is unwilling to pay you that same amount. You're 2 for 2. Seeker nodded once more. Interesting gamble. Christine smiled a cute smile again. This will be a bet that will span 4 days. Meryl set it up. Set buy-in to 500 credits. Meryl made the necessary configurations and a gambling den room was opened. She was not afraid or hesitant. Her blind faith in Seeker caused her to move swiftly as if Seeker was asking her to pass him some ketchup. Christine was the first to wager against Seeker on the den. People were shocked. Seeker was at it again, betting on himself against the whole world. How will that happen? What could Seeker do that could shake and move people to even offer Seeker such payments? He had the fame, but his reputation was far from the Prometheus of games. You're on. Not only will I bet against that, but I want to bet that if you do win, I'll immediately be your girlfriend. In fact, I'll treat you to a high-classy date on a hotel of your choosing in any country in the world. A 2-night, all-expense-paid trip, Christine smirked. Somehow, Seeker's bold and daring actions made her feel a jolt of attraction towards this casual Carlean. The chat room went wild. Several males were cursing at the obscene luck that Seeker had. A 2-night trip with one of the most attracted women in the world, and everything would be paid for by Christine? What a generous offer, Christine. Seeker smiled. He wasn't affected by such a tempting offer. You are gambling something which you probably have no chance of winning. Might as well make this a sensational thing. After all, this could easily increase your viewership. Think of it as me helping out. From one streamer to another. Christine smiled cutely. Before I accept that, can I add another clause? I would add 10,000 or more credits to my wager depending on my future earnings. Oh, another clause? As long as it's not anything that will physically harm me, I'm all for it. Christine smiled. The chat room burned with angry comments. People were calling Seeker a hacker and was in no way worthy of this. Others were making obscene jokes about how they were willing to pay that amount to get Christine for 2 nights. Christine ignored everyone. She knew that she would win this bet. Once Seeker lost, she would prove that his worth was far from his actual estimation. And with that crushing blow and the fact that he would lose more than 70,000 credits, she would then offer Seeker the discussed price that her sponsors asked her to offer. Christine was also sure that since she would ultimately win, she deliberately spiced up the bets to make Seeker greedy. For someone as famous as her, she knew how debauched men could become. She took a sip through a straw and happily drank the milkshake she had nearby her computer. Oh, the sweet taste of victory. The other clause is that instead of you going with me on that trip, I'd like Precision to go with me on a 2-night all-expense-paid trip to any country I want, Seeker casually remarked as he focused on the game. Christine spat out the milkshake, and some of it was now running through her nose. The desk was now drenched with the milkshake as Christine instinctively aimed for it to avoid drenching her beloved computer. Charles Lindmit spat out his coffee as he heard Seeker's added clause. The piles of paper and research notes surrounding him were drenched in his coffee. General Harker Cipral spat out his wine as he heard Seeker's request. The monitor on the front of him was now drenched with expensive wine. Allianz Cipral spat out the bourbon she drank from a small glass. Her phone was now drenched with the pale yellow drink she had, and even the bed sheets that were wrapped around her legs had spray marks of her drink. Meryl and Lind had a strange look at Seeker. Cliff, on the other hand, had a fearful look. There was the terror that pierced through his heart like never before. Would Seeker soon pierce him with fear on a different and far more terrifying method? The chat room suddenly went quiet. No one knew what to say. Viewers around the world felt as if their world stopped. On the other room in the building where Christine was viewing Seeker's stream, a small teen with thick glasses was holding a practice game against 2 other members of the Covenant. While the 3 were fighting, Seeker's stream was playing on a huge screen hung high on the wall. Arthur Humphrey continued to mumble random numbers as if he was counting something or several things. Just then Seeker's revision to Christine's offer was broadcasted. The 3 stopped playing. Arthur frowned with a look that surpassed his already rude appearance and stared angrily at the television. Even the random counting he did was stopped. His 2 opponents immediately logged off the game and quietly left the room. If they continued to play, they would lose their dignity as Arthur Humphrey would end his training mode and start massacring them, leaving them less confident as a pro player and even as a human being. I am sorry. You want what? Christine felt fear like never before. The Covenant of the Strongest was a happy and friendly team in general. They were quite close as a team, and even if the team would be dissolved, it was unquestionable that their friendship would remain. However, throughout their career, they never dared to do anything that would make Arthur Humphrey angry. It wasn't because he was strict or impatient as a leader. Despite his cold exterior and somewhat rude looks, he treated his team members with respect and patience. The reason why no member would dare irritate Arthur was simply because they didn't want to see Arthur angry. Who knew what he could do if ever he got angry? A cold sweat started to surface on Christine's back. She was willing to be her own body for fun, but then Seeker made a hasty change of preference. Some strange teen was professing his love and his preference on the internet. While this would normally have been fun or romantic, in this particular scenario, it wasn't. Not when Arthur Humphrey's the recipient of this love. She could already see the headlines. Arthur Humphrey to spend a 2-night romantic getaway with medical wonder, Seeker Carlean. Well, you could join us if you like, Christine. The fear in Christine's heart took a deeper and scarier dive. At the back of her mind, she just wished for Seeker to shut up. So, is the bet on? Christine couldn't answer. She was flustered. Just then the door opened. Arthur Humphrey walked in. Christine was petrified. She dared not move and simply looked at the approaching person. She slowly slid her chair backward. Arthur pushed Christine's seat away while dragging another. He sat down right in front of the computer. His gaze was strict and angry. Wow, Arthur Humphrey himself? That's nice. I appreciate your sentiments, but I refuse to take part in such a stupid gamble. Arthur spoke rigidly. Okay, it was worth a shot. Then I'm fine with the original conditions. But if you have time, I would love to talk to you. Seeker smiled casually. Arthur gazed angrily at Seeker, but suddenly he stood up and walked away. Moments after Arthur left the room, Christine slowly dragged her chair back to face the monitor. She looked as if she saw a ghost. Seeker smiled at her as she re-entered the screen. Anyways, guys, this is all the time I have for you today. 2 more sessions, and I should be able to complete the entire game. Please join me on my stream tomorrow for more of this action-packed and mind-boggling walkthrough. Also, if you are confident that I will lose, the room remains open. I might increase the bet again tomorrow, so feel free to donate. To bet against me. Seeker casually remarked and immediately motioned for Meryl to end the stream. Just like that, the stream ended. Most of the viewers were caught off guard from the sudden turn of events and remained in shock at what just happened. Several even went online to ask what just happened. Those who would read the news late at night were befuddled and also asked what just happened. It was chaos. One article spoke of how Dr. Lindmit partnered with Seeker for a program that could shape neural alterations. Another article spoke of the gambling and overnight success of a rising star, and another article which talked about how Lord Chokmi Senpai, the world's most successful streamer, placed her own body as a bet. And finally, a news article surfaced that asked one simple question: what just happened? Chapter 29. Odds of the Gamble. Seeker relaxed and rested his eyes. What a very profitable and beneficial day. Seeker sighed, satisfied with his progress for the day. His 2 friends continued to give him a peculiar look. Seeker looked back. I'm not gay. Seeker finally spoke. So what was that all about? Lind asked suspiciously. Arthur Humphreys, a potential ranked hero. Normally, I plan to keep myself away from those who had the potential to reach ranked hero or beyond because of the possible ripple effects that I might cause. This one, however, is different. He's the same as I am, so I think it would offer no threats but pure benefits. Such is the man called Arthur Humphrey. Oh, no wonder you wanted him. I was surprised that you could easily reject Christine's offer. Oh, trust me, I wouldn't dare have her right now. Seeker smiled mysteriously. Now that I think about it, you never did tell us if you managed to land a hot one in the future, Zeke. Meryl smiled mischievously. Seeker's eyes looked towards the heavens. She's complicated, Meryl. Seeker spoke with a very detached tone. Meryl suddenly stopped her teasing. With the future that Seeker had, it wouldn't be surprising that Seeker would meet and say goodbye to several friends. Meryl even had a very embarrassed look. Zeke, Lynn spoke as he was rummaging Seeker's bag. Your phone's got like 30 missed calls. Must be Mom and Dad. It's not surprising that they'd get word of everything that has been going on. You sure it's all right? Auntie Grace hates gambling after all. Meryl had a grave look. Relax. I'll deal with them. Seeker smiled. Cliff, I want you to beat up anyone on that list if you have a chance. Just enough to get them to the hospital. Don't make it too life-threatening. Cliff jolted as Seeker spoke to him. And while you're beating them, make sure to put on some mask or something and make it look like you're one of those foreigner haters. Seeker stood up and started walking. The group left the duplex immediately. The strange and action-packed night finally ended. The next day, classes resumed. Seeker and his 2 friends were now being treated like superstars. They were like a bunch of superstars at school. People would wave and attempt to talk with Seeker. Seeker's rise of prestige was so dramatic compared to before. Not even royals felt that they had the qualifications to meet and talk with Seeker. Their level of connection paled compared the worth of Seeker in both the gaming and the medical world. Despite the increase in fame, there were very few girls who attempted to make contact with Seeker. Lind had an exasperated look. Zeke, You got to do something to clear this misunderstanding, Lind begged. Leave it, Lind. If anything, it might be better this way. A lot of annoying things would pop up if I were to meet Arthur in any other way. Seeker rejected immediately. Could you properly define annoying? Meryl asked as she gave a bland look at Seeker. Possible assassinations from professional hitmen or getting abducted by some intelligence agency from enemy countries. Seeker easily responded. The two gave a surprised look. How would meeting an esport gamer end with such drastic results? Okay, then it looks like I'll have to put up with this for a bit. Lynn sighed. How did your parents take the news? My mom and dad were asking me a lot of questions, and even asking me if I can invite you and Charles over dinner. Meryl asked Lynn. Basically the same as you. It was annoying. They also asked me if I knew if Seeker was gay. Lynn sighed. What about you, Zeke? What did Aunt Grace have to say with your gambling? Meryl laughed. Well, at first she was mad when I came home. She started yelling, telling me that she doesn't care about my medication and how gambling is off the table. Dad just had a serious look. No doubt he was angry about the whole Arthur thing, Seeker explained. Then I explained how I needed to meet with Arthur for a secret meeting to discuss the terms of my contract and the future of the covenant. I told them that I wanted Christine, so that calmed my dad down. What about Aunt Grace? She calmed down when I gave the two of them tickets to a 7-day cruise on the Bahamas. In fact, I think she was encouraging me to continue saying that my health is more important than her standards. Typical for Auntie, Meryl laughed. The three met Alian Ciprel later on in class. Her face showed signs of being hit, and the students were panicking and asking her what happened. Lind and Meryl had a confused look since while they knew that of the wounds on her face were caused by Seeker's smash, there were some that were clearly not inflicted by Seeker. Seeker seemed to have not found this surprising and continued yawning in class. Alian brushed addressed the asking students, saying that it was due to her spars with some of the soldiers under her father's command. Several male students felt jealous as they daydreamed of wrestling with this hot teacher of theirs. The class eventually came to an end. Seeker, I would like to talk to you for a bit, Alian suddenly asked in a very courteous tone. Several of the class was confused. They knew of Alian's unexplainable hatred towards Seeker and how she would be very biased. But now there was courtesy in her voice. Some even thought it was respected. The three remained as the other students shuffled out of the room. Miss Ciprel, I think it would be to everyone's benefit if you acted as if you hated me. Try to do what you usually do. Don't worry. I won't make it harder for you on account of Lind. Seeker stood with a boorish look. Alian glanced at Lind for a moment. Lind was blushing to the extremes, but Alian gave a sweet smile to Lind. Then thank you. She smiled. Lind's heart was pumping faster than the normal heart rate of a man being chased by 3 werewolves. My father agreed to the meeting. Thank you for that insurance. Alian spoke as she rubbed her chin. This was the only punishment I got from General. Whatever that was, it brought him to his knees. Alian gave another smile. It looked like a smile one would give when encountering true happiness. Lind's heart was beating so fast it could have caused a heart attack. Must have been a satisfying sight for you considering how happy you look recalling that. Seeker chuckled. Also, as a future partner in this business, I would urge you to stay away from Arthur Humphrey. Alian had a serious look on her face. If you're talking about how dangerous Lennox is, I already know. Seeker shrugged. A surprised look flashed on Alian's face. Lennox? Meryl had a confused look. Before Seeker could elaborate, Alian spoke. Lennox Humphrey, Arthur's father, the most dangerous mathematician on this planet. Even my father is afraid of him. So you knew. But you still want to take Arthur on a 2-day trip? Are you crazy? Alian was controlling her urge to shout. There was fear painted across her face. Lind and Meryl were surprised to see the scared look of this woman. A mathematician would leave a general and a drug lord scared? How? It isn't a date trip. It's business. I plan to strike a deal with Arthur, and this is the fastest, easiest, and least suspicious path that I could take. You probably have an idea as to how many eyes are watching that man. Pulling off a publicity stunt like this would quench all doubts and give me the chance to talk to him privately and maybe even get the opportunity to meet Lennox. Alian had a look of true horror in her face. If Seeker was attracted to Arthur, it would have been potentially scary. But if Seeker wanted to meet Lennox, then it was terrifying. Alian's horrified face started to calm down. She remembered that in front of her was someone who managed to get her father to his knees without being in the same room. Can you kill him? Alian suddenly asked. Killing Lennox would give his father and his empire a lot of benefits. Are you stupid? He's one of the few people on this earth who can kill me. I have business proposals to offer him, but don't worry. It will only benefit your father's kingdom. Seeker walked out of the room. The remaining three stood in shock at Seeker's statement. Meryl slowly followed. Lind was about to leave when Alian called him. Lind, wait. She called out softly. Lind was petrified. He slowly turned back to look at me. Alian gave a warm smile. Who would have thought that you'd be able to help me of all people? Thank you, she smiled. Don't worry. I won't take advantage of your feelings towards me to make you betray Seeker. I'm not that stupid anyway. But since he didn't give a directive, could you just tell me who Seeker Carlean is? Alian stared pleadingly. Lind felt as if heaven was touching him. That kind smile, that soft stare. If only time would stop. Lind smiled but shook his head. He has always been honest in answering you, Mississippi. Lind smiled back. He really is a kid who just knows about the future. Lind turned around and walked out of the room. As classes ended, Seeker and his friends went straight to the duplex to host another stream. Seeker earned 30,000 credits on stream views alone. Christine joined the call again, but instead of a casual viewer, Seeker pushed his skills up another notch. That's impossible. Counting? That's how you do it. Christine shouted in surprise. That's how Precision does it, right? In fact, I think he's better at it than I am. Seeker shrugged. Bullet was facing 5 different titans this time. Unlike the former titans, this one had what appeared to be an electronic charge that generated around their bodies. As Bullet had next to no ranged attacks, Seeker continued to parry and dodge and would only attack whenever the electronic charge of these robots would disappear after initiating an attack. But that's impossible. Each of these titans has different timing and sequence of attack. You'd need a machine to keep track of all of their sequences to tell you when to attack. Christine complained, but against her statement, Seeker was controlling Bullet with expert control. Evade about 3 of the titans' attack, and dash to inflict 3 or 4 hits to the surrounding titans without the electric current and back out. The gamble this time was that Seeker would complete the boss without getting a single hit. The boss was dubbed undefeatable unless the players would utilize the environmental advantages to stun and paralyze the titans. But Seeker claimed he could without using the environmental advantages. Seeker was set to win 4,700 credits from some unbelieving fools. Christine was angry and in shock at what she could see. I see. So that's the counting. A detached voice spoke from behind of Christine. She jolted and turned to see Arthur watching. Precision. Seeker called out happily. His attention no longer was on the screen, but his avatar continued to evade and attack as beautifully as before. Interesting, you managed to calculate the counting perfectly for this boss. A rare smile emerged from Arthur's face. It was very rare for someone of his prestige to be impressed. I'm happy that I've impressed you. Indeed, it could be said that your counting skills are on par with mine. Arthur adjusted his glasses as he continued to observe Seeker's counting. Simple enough, Arthur sighed. However, this is not enough to make the teams move to treat you like me. Arthur sneered. Okay, then why not bet it if you're so confident? I bet that I can manage a payslip better than yours by Friday. If I win, you go with me and Christine on this 2-night getaway. If I lose, then I'll join your team free of charge. I'm sure you've seen my accurate counting. If I could team up with you and the Covenant, no one on this planet could match us. Seeker smiled. Arthur frowned at Seeker's taunt. Unless the great Precision cannot calculate the odds of this bet. Seeker smiled. Arthur's frown turned into an angry glare. Chapter 30. Enter the Dragon. Several military vans were parked in a factory at the outskirts of the city. The military base was miles away from this place. Yet the soldiers guarded this place as if it was a fortress that guarded several military secrets. The high wall surrounding this factory stood at over 10 meters tall, and posted on certain key points of the wall stood several soldiers that guarded it at the dark of the night. A car was stealthily parked a few blocks away from this factory. A group of teens and one adult stood and were whispering quietly. Are you sure she didn't see you follow her? Seeker asked. No, I was sure. She really looked disturbed. So I doubt that she noticed. Cliff responded with a bit of frustration. Because if she did see you, you'd probably get killed tonight. Seeker laughed. Are you really going to attack their base? Meryl looked with a doubtful expression. Yes, Meryl. For the 1,000th time, yes. But how? I don't think they'd let you in. That's why I asked the good doctor to lend me his stuff. Seeker smiled. Lynn got excited. Cool. What is it? Grappling hooks? High-tech wall climbing gears? A hover pad? I brought a pair of mountain climbing pickaxe. Charles sighed. Lynn's mouth was wide open. What are you going to do with that? Lynn barely managed to contain his frustration. Scale the wall. Seeker smiled. Now stay here and be good kitties. I'll call you when it's over. Seeker smiled. Meryl and Lind gave a worried look. Seeker insisted that they didn't need to come, but they wouldn't take no for an answer. Seeker started to dash off towards the factory. His sudden movements would be compared to a ninja who knew how to utilize the darkness and was soon out of sight from Meryl and Lynn's. Amazing. He just disappeared like that. Cliff couldn't help but comment. See? I told you there's nothing to get all worried about. Seeker could easily handle this situation. Charles gave a comforting pat to Meryl. Are you serious? We didn't come here because we were worried, you know? We were curious and we wanted to see a good show. Meryl scoffed. Seeker finally reached a shaded area near the tall wall. He positioned himself right on the bottom where several guards were stationed on a platform on top of the wall. Seeker observed for the soldier's line of sight. When the soldier moved to observe a different area, Seeker dashed towards the wall. Seeker executed a very complex wall run which pushed him high above the 3-meter mark. He smashed the 2 pickaxes to cling to the wall. Strangely, the penetration of the pickaxe was very discreet, as it only penetrated barely an inch from the surface. This, however, managed to provide Seeker support. Without wasting any time, Seeker kicked his 2 legs to propel him higher as he unhooked the pickaxes and smashed it once more on a higher area of the wall. Seeker repeated this movement, and in just less than 10 seconds, he reached the top of the wall. His pickaxes were now hanging on the edge of the wall. Thankfully, the darkness of the night wouldn't make the hanging's pickaxe visible if viewed from afar. Seeker paused for a bit and closed his eyes. He could feel the soldier walking nearer towards his location as the muffled sounds may have attracted him. Seeker immediately kicked once more and jumped to reach the top of the wall. Seeker immediately thrust the pickaxe to the surprised soldier's throat. The blunt top of the pickaxe struck the soldier's throat, who was now choking. Seeker immediately proceeded to deliver an intense uppercut, knocking the soldier unconscious. Seeker stealthily dashed towards the stairs leading to the bottom and took note of the building, which had several lights lit on. Soldiers were caught off guard as Seeker would attack them from their blind spots. Seeker used a variety of tricks to ensure they wouldn't let out a sound whenever Seeker would attack them. 3 soldiers were just being pummeled by Seeker when another guard walked in and immediately pulled the gun out of his holster. Idiot, your safety's on. Seeker shook his head. The soldier immediately turned his gun sideways to check his gun. This 1-second gap was enough for Seeker to throw his pickaxe to disarm the solider and deliver a crushing kick on the soldier's throat. Seeker sighed. Why does this trick always work? Seeker wondered and started to rush on towards the main building. Seeker stood right outside the door and closed his eyes. 7, huh? Seeker sighed once more. Seeker immediately opened the door and dashed inside. There were 7 soldiers on this area, each doing their own thing. Seeker was dashing towards the nearest guard, but turned his attention to another guard on the other end of the room carrying a gun with a silencer equipped. Seeker threw his pickaxes as if they were boomerangs and started to dash towards the soldier with the silencer. The other soldiers hadn't even noticed Seeker come into the room due to the speed that Seeker was moving. Time was very slow in Seeker's perspective. He reached the soldier, who was still in the process of reaching for his gun holster, and penetrating punch to the stomach was delivered. It was as if the stomach acid was rising up his throat. The soldier was about to vomit whatever spit or food out when another terrifying punch shocked his jaw. He was out for the count. The trajectory of the pickaxe flew in a curving motion which evaded several obstacles. The blunt end of the pickaxe smashed towards the heads of 2 unwary soldiers. Seeker immediately reached for the silencer and started to shoot around. He aimed for all the triggers of the guns that the soldiers were currently holding as he was running towards another surprised soldier. In less than 10 seconds, all the soldiers in the room were defeated, with no one managing to shoot a single bullet. In a dark room inside the main building, a huge man stood carrying a large whip. "Tell me what I need to know, and you can leave," the man ordered. Bounded in a chair in front of him was an Asian man who had a lot of burn wounds in his eyes. "I don't know anything. I am blind. Why would you think that I have it?" The huge man whipped the blind man. Blood was coming out of the blind man's teeth. Wrong answer. Blind my ass. You took out those 3 soldiers, right? I really don't know. All I heard was some commotion, and then you guys suddenly jumped on me. It wasn't me. I swear. The blind man pleaded. The huge man tore the shirt of the blind man. You know what I'm going to do? The huge man laughed. The blind man had a sudden strange expression, but immediately tried to look afraid. Mark, tell him what we are going to do with him. We're going to dress you up like a cute Barbie doll. A sneering voice returned. The huge man laughed. That's right. We're going to… Wait, what? The huge man turned and met a strong high kick which dislocated his jaw. Before the man could lose his balance, the assailant grabbed his head as a knee strike smashed to his face. The huge man fell down unconscious. Behind the assailant, there laid an unconscious soldier that could only be Mark. The blind man nervously listened. Who's there? What's going on? The blind man kept tossing and turning. Interesting. A causal voice spoke as this figure started to walk around the blind man. Seeker gazed at a peculiar tattoo on the left side of the bounded man's chest. It was a faint dragon coiling which formed a circle. In the middle of this dragon was a dark red sun. I'm almost sure that that's the mark of the dragon. Do you work for him? I don't remember you. Seeker had met all of the dragon's best subordinates. This one wasn't in his memories. What? I don't understand. The blind man answered back as he struggled in fear. He kept following where the voice was calling. Please help me. Get me out of this place. I was brought here by mistake. The blind man called out. Seeker chuckled. Yeah, right. You are. Seeker ignored the helpless cries of the bound man, but continued to observe him. After a few seconds, Seeker shrugged off the thought of this person being a top warrior in the dragon's army. Sorry, I don't want to put my nose where it doesn't belong. If you don't work for him, then I must have guessed wrong. I thought you were Mr. Meng's subordinates. Seeker shrugged off as he walked towards the door. Just then, Seeker stopped and turned around and clapped his hand to block an arm thrust. The blind man was no longer bounded, and his thick arms were immediately struggling to move. Seeker managed to block the arm just on time. The blind man frowned. Oh, so I was right. This is annoying. Seeker sighed dryly. The blind man moved with quick and precise actions as he tried to use his bare hands like a sword and continued several thrusting attacks. Seeker would either dodge or parry the attacks and would even use his arms to redirect the attacks. I am not your enemy. Seeker sighed as he kept evading the flurry of thrust. As the attacks started to increase with intensity, Seeker suddenly jumped back and stood a few meters away from the blind man. Some parts of Seeker's clothes were torn, and a very rare sight was seen. Seeker Carlean had a small wound on his right arm. The blind man was furious. He used the best of his abilities and could only scratch this young teen. Listen, pal, I'm busy. I don't have any intentions to blow your cover. Keep this up, and I'll give you a beating so bad that you'd wish you were facing the dragon instead of me. Seeker spoke angrily. The blind man took a readied stance. His enemy was worthy of utilizing all his martial prowess on. I do not know who you are, but you must die. You have jeopardized my mission. Taking advantage of your long reach, huh? Seeker sighed once more. This encounter was causing more trouble than he had originally bargained for. The blind man ran forward and aimed a punch towards Seeker. Seeker concentrated, and time started to slow down. A second felt like 7. Seeker stared at the approaching arm thrust. He could see the unnatural hardness of the blind man's fingers. The thrust slowly approached Seeker, but just then, Seeker clenched at his fist with his middle finger slightly protruding. 3 punches were immediately delivered on the forearms of the blind man. The flurry of fists were so fast, the blind man immediately backed away and was clutching his right arm as if he was in pain. As Meng would always advise, when facing someone with a longer reach, then it's simple. Aim for his hands. Seeker smiled. The blind man frowned and dashed once more. But as he drew closer, a crushing sensation gripped his heart. He stopped attacking and immediately knelt down on one leg. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you are Master's student, the blind man respectfully answered. His hands and legs were shivering in fear. Seeker, who just released his indomitable aura, had a very peculiar look on his face. Chapter 31. A Pill for Hypertension. Seeker stared in confusion at the immediate change of tone of this blind man. However, What surprised Seeker the more was how this blind man managed to keep his head cool despite the heavy aura Seeker had just released. Yeah, about that. I'm one of Meng's son? Seeker guessed. The shivering blind man shivered all the more. He just attacked his master's son. Forgive my presumptuousness. Had I known you would be one of master's heirs, I would not have attacked. The blind man continued to maintain his respectful tone, but Seeker could see how pale he was of fright. I understand the confusion. Seeker sighed in relief. Thank God this assassin was not very bright. I am one of his prodigal sons. We left father after we finished training. Ugh. You just made me call him father. The tension in the air just grew tighter. The blind man was clutching his fist tightly, trying to maintain his respectful position despite the heart-gripping sensation. Forgive me. The blind man apologized once more. I wonder how is Mr. Ming's killing intent now? Seeker asked curiously. About twice as young master. The blind man immediately answered. Seeker sighed. Damned monster. Anyways, go home. Don't tell Mr. Ming we'd met. It would only make your life more miserable if he asked you to bring me back. Seeker started to walk for the door. As you wish, young master. The blind man remained in a respectful position. Seeker hesitated to open the door. He thought for a bit and suddenly turned around. What's your name? This blind one is called Sting. The blind man respectfully responded. The sensation was gone, but his heart was beating faster than ever. The aura of fear blinded his thinking process. Now that his sense and thoughts were finally getting in order, he was more afraid. I have a prophecy for you, Sting. Seeker sighed. If you remain only as strong as this, you will die in the future. Probably within the next 7 years. Seeker spoke harshly. Sting had a surprised look, but dared not raise his head to face Seeker. Your path is wrong. I believe you relied on your ears to see, correct? It's a wrong path. It's very inefficient. Look, I'll put on these earplugs and cover my eyes. Toss these pickaxes to me with the intent to kill. Seeker threw the 2 pickaxes on the floor and wrapped his eyes with a black bandana he carried. He took the pair of earplugs he was wearing earlier and put them on again. Sting had a confused look. He was sure that Seeker did cover his eyes and plugged his ears. He hesitantly took the pickaxe. With wary eyes, he gazed at the casual teen who stood before him. Don't hold back. I order you to attack me. If you fail to impress me, I will kill you. Seeker spoke harshly once more. Sting no longer hesitated. This was just like his master. Sting took out a hidden blade which he kept on his shoes. He immediately threw 2 pickaxes in a curving motion, and threw the blade discreetly. All of his attacks were aimed to hit an empty area barely, which would lead all the 3 flying weapons to graze on Seeker's skin. Unlike his expected outcome, Seeker casually caught the pickaxes which weren't going to hit him and knocked off the blade with the pickaxe. You're very respectful, aren't you? I like that. Seeker smiled as he took off his blindfold and the earplugs. Sting stood in shock at Seeker's skill. That's all the time I have for you. Leave this place. Report that a mysterious attacker raided this place which allowed you to escape. Seeker then turned to leave. Sting was still dazed with the skill Seeker had displayed. Was it true? Did he follow the wrong path to strength? As Seeker opened the door, he turned once more to Sting. A hesitant face surfaced once more. Do you know about out-of-body experiences? Aim to experience those. The key is not to hear it, but feel it. Feel the area as if you can see it. By now, Seeker waved and walked out. 2 individuals were viewing Seeker's stream on a huge monitor. I'm not interested in anything that you have, and the reason why I am not betting against you isn't fear, but pride. Why would I bet against you and ruin my own prestige by entertaining a monkey? Arthur's tone was harsh. Okay, then let's change the bet. By your estimations, what is the fastest time a person could complete piercing? Edge. Seeker smiled. This surprised Arthur. He didn't expect this question to come up. He gave a casual glance at Seeker's character and sneered. Your build is inefficient. By your current progression, it would take you about 18 hours and 35 minutes, give or take. An efficient build that follows my calculations would allow a 15-hour completion. Arthur smiled. He wasn't giving room for courtesies anymore. Someone was trampling his reputation. He was amused at first at Seeker's skills, but now wasn't the time to act in humility. Everyone viewing the stream was either typing so fast or listening so intently at this conversation. The entire game world was led to believe that a melee-based edge was the way to go. The masses followed in blindly as they witnessed a game progression faster than they could manage, and soon Seeker's build was the model build. Precept Gaming hadn't even had the chance to release a video depicting the glories of ranged combat, as it had just been a few days since Seeker's rise to fame. Correct. This isn't the fastest way to pass the game. Oh, how I just love to have a dip in that brain of yours. Seeker smiled. But what if I can complete this game under 8 hours while using this exact build? Arthur laughed as he heard Seeker's bold declaration. Impossible. There would be no way that you can do that. Arthur sneered. So you calculate that it is impossible for this build to complete the game under 8 hours? Yes. I don't need to run the numbers. Any idiot would know that by now. The overall animations and cutscenes in this game, along with the mandatory text sequences, would already take you over an hour. Much more beating bosses. Arthur scoffed. Then bet with me. If I win, you agree with the meeting. You pay for everything on a 2-night romantic getaway. I prove that you are not the best gamer on this earth and how severely lacking your estimations are. If you win, you prove everything that I am trying to disprove, and I will join your team for free. Seeker smiled. The eyes of Arthur once again had a fit of blazing anger growing within. If I win, you will forever stop gaming. You will also sign a contract to which, if you ever play or use your gaming skills to earn, be it directly or indirectly, if you do, you will relinquish everything you own to an establishment or person of my selection. The chatroom was suddenly devoid of activity. Everyone was shocked at Arthur's demands. Deal. Seeker smiled and gleefully nodded. Christine had a shocked look at Seeker's immediate agreement, and Arthur was frowning. Ladies and gents, I will hold a special stream on Saturday. After all, I did promise to show everyone a power walkthrough with 0 hits. So I'll end this walkthrough on tomorrow's stream. But by Saturday, I'll start on an 8-hour special stream. I will complete Piercing Bullet with an all-melee build and prove precision wrong. Is that a deal, Precision? Seeker returned the question. Arthur stared angrily at Seeker. He gave a small smirk. Deal. Get your lawyers ready. I don't want to start the stream until I have it on paper. Let's make this business deal as professional as possible. Seeker returned a smirk. They'll visit you at school tomorrow. Arthur walked out of the screen, not even bothering to give Seeker another look. Christine looked awkwardly as she remained. She immediately disconnected after a bit of pondering. The stream continued with Seeker silently playing through the game. No one was interested in talking about Seeker's walkthrough. Even Seeker's believers were now doubting the sanity of their idol. They knew Seeker made bold gambles that he managed to complete, but now a more impossible gamble was set. Seeker didn't answer any questions in relation to his Saturday stream. He later ended the stream as he usually did, abrupt and anticlimactic. Viewers were disappointed at Seeker's indifferent reactions. Everyone wanted the day to quickly pass and for Saturday to start. The two individuals who were watching had a grim expression on their face. Why is he doing this? Despite knowing about Linux, he still has these unknown intentions towards Arthur. Harker frowned. Alion stood by the side and was sighing. Seeker claimed it's a business proposal. Just who is he? Harker frowned. He wasn't one to panic or lose patience, but the fear of knowing and the looming threat that has arrived were starting to get to make him feel the very emotions he hasn't felt for a long time. General, will Linux go after Seeker because of this? No. Unless Arthur's life is threatened, I doubt Linux would get involved. If anything, Linux would want his son to get wrapped by some sick teenager. That could send the prodigal son home. Alion had a confused look at his father. Then why are you worried about a possible interaction with Linux? Do you remember the time I pretended to have been severely wounded? Harper spoke with an impatient voice. Of course I did. You were in the middle of a war and in the middle of our biggest deals yet. I had a hard time covering for you. Alion's tone had no respect as she answered her father back. Alion frowned as she recalled that terrifying ordeal. The reason why I did that was because of an invitation from Linux. When we arrived at his estate on Britain, I was shocked to see who was also invited. Gathered in one roof was the underworld itself. Everyone who was anyone in the underworld was there. Alion was surprised. He had been in this business for too long to know the names of these underworld criminals, but someone managed to gather them into one house. There were two possible reasons that will bring the underworld together. Extreme profit that would make the heads of these organizations to make a personal trip, or fear of losing their empire should they anger this man. Linux prepared quite a banquet for us. When he finally appeared, We finally got our answer to this mysterious invitation. Harker frowned. What was it for? He had nothing much to say. No proposals. No deals. He just stood there and stared at everyone and said, "If anything happens to my son, say goodbye to your empires." Harker recalled the indifferent look that Lennox gave as he addressed the underworld. It was as if Satan himself had the authority that could not match this man. That's it. Alion was surprised. He could gather the entire underworld just to warn them? Alion, if ever you get to where I am, you'd know not to mess with these men. That's why we've always kept an eye for Arthur. And now, that teen you brought over wants Arthur. We could die if Seeker would kill or cause Arthur's death. Crash. The doors burst open as several men came flying in. A figure walked in. He stood with a pair of pickaxes that were used by mountain climbers. He wore casual clothes. Nothing about what he wore could describe his very purpose of visiting this factory. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about OL Arthur," Seeker greeted happily. He stepped on the unconscious soldiers that lay flat on the ground. "Seeker," Alion cried in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "High blood pressure. I need to take my meds," Seeker chuckled. Chapter 32. Dance with the Dragon. Harker quickly drew the gun in his holster, but a pickaxe was sent flying into his arms. The pickaxe's blunt top smashed Harker's hand and stopped him from reaching his guns. "The next pickaxe won't hit you with the blunt end, General," Seeker smiled. Harker frowned. He didn't expect Seeker to have made the visit tonight. "I thought we agreed to meet tomorrow." Harker's tone was indifferent and flat. He took a look at the unconscious soldiers. "What can I say? I'm a man of surprises," Seeker giggled. "Now let's get down to business, General. As you can see, I can easily kill you." Seeker pointed to his unconscious guards. These were soldiers who were the elite in Harker's mini-army. Yet this teen could easily conquer them. "But do you know why I went through all the trouble to do this?" Seeker smiled. "To make me fear you?" Harker asked with an indifferent expression. "Now why would I do that? Have you noticed that I haven't killed any one of your soldiers? What kind of fear would I pass to you if I act all merciful?" Harker glanced at the unconscious soldiers. It was true. None of them were dead. Then what? "To prove a point. I don't need you. I don't need your help. But, right now, an alliance with you, it is the most convenient way to achieve my goal." Seeker smiled. "And how can I help you?" Harker walked over and started pouring himself a bottle of whiskey. Harker offered a glass to Seeker. "No thanks. I'm still underaged." Seeker smiled. "So a 17-year-old can come in, beat the crap of all my soldiers, and refuse to drink wine since he is underage. I wonder why is it that all that my hard-biled and striped elites could manage is to scratch you. What kind of world am I living in? Oh, this wound wasn't inflicted by one of yours. A blind guy did this." Harker and Alion stared at each other. "You have a weird sense of humor, Mr. Carlean. How can I help you?" The impatient general reiterated. "Partner with me. I've got a lot of things to do, and it requires quite a bit of funding, not to mention manpower, facilities, and a secret base of operations. Also, your influence in the government and military would also prove useful." Seeker spoke easily. "So you want me to allocate all of my time and resource for your little projects?" Harkers raised his eyebrows. "Well, not all. I will require you to commit on some tasks, but as for resources, about 30% of your income would do." Seeker smiled. Harker stood in silence. He honestly expected worse. "And what would I gain in this, partnership?" "I'll make you the leader of the Pangean nations." Seeker spoke with confidence. Harker sneered. "And why would I want to be the leader of this nation? If you haven't noticed, I thrive in secrecy. Being in that position would only harm my operations, because the dragon is planning to conquer your empire. You need all the power and authority you could get to survive." Seeker gave a devilish grin. The sneer turned into a sudden, shocked look. The dragon?" Harker could not help but stutter. "Yes, the dragon. You might know him as Robertson Ming. The reason I want to get chummy with Arthur is to make sure his dad won't get in between this dance with the dragon. If Lennox would join me in this battle, then it would assure my victory. Of course, that's a hopeless cause. So at most, I want Lennox to not meddle in this dance with Ming. Facing one of them is already frustrating enough. If the other decides to join in the commotion, then all hope for victory is lost." Seeker gave a depressed sigh. Harker clutched his fist in fear. Seeker was talking about the same dragon that he knew. Oh, and you really don't have a choice on this matter. Originally, I came here to just make a proposal, but I don't know if you know about the blind guy that you or your men abducted. Now, this battle is definitely underway. The blind man? Our men caught him in the middle of one of our operations earlier. Parker had a confused look. Seeker pointed to his wound. Which blind guy did you think did this? The blind man who your men were interrogating is Sting, one of Meng's most skilled warriors. What? Harker knew of Sting by name, an assassin of deadly repute. Never in Harker's imagination would that known assassin be a blind man. I don't know if he was sent here to kill you. That is the most probable cause, though. Luckily, I chased him off. This, however, would be to your favor. Now the dragon thinks that we are not on the same side considering the state in which I left your men in. Parker walked over to his desk and sat down. The whiskey was trembling in his hand. Why would Dragon aim to kill him? It didn't make sense. What could the dragon possibly want with me? Parker shouted at Seeker. His once fearful state was replaced with a confused and panicked expression. Seeker pointed to Alian. What else, General? That thing in your daughter's heart. Seeker smiled. Parker was shocked silent. The dragon was one of his main buyers. But who would have thought that he would yearn for his programmed slave technology? Alian had a confused look at Seeker. What thing? Alian asked. The programmed slave chips. Seeker responded flatly. Alian felt as if her entire body was floating. She stood petrified. She never really could get out of her father's grasp. Why would the dragon want my technology? Parker asked, ignoring her daughter's surprise. What are the most amazing traits of the programmed slave chip? Let's see. It's nigh untraceable even with the most advanced technologies on Earth. It's impossible to reverse engineer, and the materials used should only be native to the Pangean nations. Gee, this is a tough one. Why would Dragon want this tech? A deeper sense of terror clutched Harker's heart. Who would have thought that his most frequent buyer had other motives for buying this item? If you want me to answer this very obvious question, then I shall. The way you've been using this technology was wasteful because of your cautious nature, General. Seeker walked over and sat down at the chair adjacent to the chair that Harker sat on. Seeker disrespectfully propped his feet up Harker's desk. If used properly, the programmed slave could allow its owner to rule the world, perhaps even become a god who could give them happiness at the flip of a switch. Maybe Dragon wants that. Seeker relaxed at the seat's incline. Harker slowly lifted his glass and drank. So what are you going to do now? How confident are you in stopping him? Harker glared. Well, for now, he's probably twice as strong as me physically speaking. The array of my abilities would prove helpless in front of his. So I don't think I stand a chance. Seeker laughed. Harker was brimming with anger. Just when he thought he was saved, Casual Carlean declared that he doesn't stand a chance towards the dragon. Seeing Harker's descent to anger made Seeker laughed out once more. Relax. I said for now. I could easily get stronger and stand toe-to-toe with him. My main issue is his subordinates. Right now some could keep me busy. I mean that blind guy managed to scratch me. That should speak miles for his skills. Your poor soldiers couldn't even make me flinch. Harker sat down and had a very serious expression. Agree to partner with me, and I'll agree to help you out of this dilemma. Seeker smiled. Harker slowly nodded. Great. Seeker extended his hand. Harker slowly reached out and shook it. Now, in order to prove your sincerity, I'll need a couple of things. 5 million Sidians transferred to my account immediately, the biggest red emerald jewel on your collection, a set of weapons and ammo, military intel on the following items, and a lifetime free pass to all of those buffet restaurants you own. Seeker handed out a piece of paper. He had a look that anticipated the awaiting dishes. Harker gave an angry glare, but somewhere in this glare was a trace of confusion. Buffet restaurants? Alian, transfer the money to his account now. I'll take a look at your list once you secured my safety from the dragon. Harker was about to keep the paper in his pocket. Wait, I'll tell you what to do now. It isn't that complicated, honestly. Seeker laughed. Harker frowned. What do you mean? Let's review the facts. Dragon sent an assassin to kill you. But his assassin met a formidable warrior with dashing good looks and a wicked set of pickaxes. So, logically, since his assassin retreated with only managing to scratch this warrior, Dragon would have to act cautiously. Harker gave a stupid look at Seeker. He was right. It was simple. His guess would be someone equal to his level must have sent this assassin. Probably Lennox or Eagle or even the great common man. How did you dash? Harker shivered at the mention of Eagle. How did this teen know about so many terrifying personalities? Seeker, however, simply ignored this. After all, who would have the resource or connection to get someone like me right? Basically, whoever the dragon thinks is trying to get to you isn't someone he can casually mess with. Harker's fear was subsiding. He was right. The dragon has always been a cautious man. Trouble like this would definitely be avoided. However, that isn't enough. Something has to occur on our meeting. The most likely expectation is that you'd wind up dead due to a master assassin. Seeker spoke with a dreadful tone. The fear was slowly returning as Harker's heart started pumping faster again. But, Seeker teased. But what? Harker followed. Seeker grinned confidently. He stood up and started to crack his fists. There was confidence in his look, pride in his posture, dignity in his smile, and terrifying power in his cracking fist. Harker slowly leaned forward, awaiting Seeker's reply. He was at the edge of his seat. He was saved. What did he need to do? I really haven't thought about it that far. Seeker sighed. Harker angrily smashed the table. Quit playing around, Harker screamed. Alion couldn't help but chuckle at Seeker's casual remark. Seeker gave a loud laugh as he saw Harker's expression. Relax, I'm just teasing you. For a general, you sure are uptight. Oh wait, generals are supposed to be this uptight. Seeker nodded in realization. Tell me, Harker shouted once more. I already did right from the start. Seeker smiled. Be a politician. Aim for the presidential seat of Philpangaea. And once you do that, aim for the prime director of the Pangaean nations. This sudden change of behavior would confuse the dragon and make him think that you really are connected with any of these men. He'll set out to uncover who it is that is pulling the strings behind your show. But since there is none, he'd be wasting a lot of time and resource. And that equals enough time for me to get ready. Seeker smiled. Harker stood silently. His hands still remained planted on the table. It really was that easy. So, will you carry out your end of the bargain? Seeker asked once more. I will. Harker resumed his usual indifferent expression. Oh, and one more thing. Seeker immediately snatched a metal pinned on Harker's shirt. Harker's immediate expression was confusion. But after he realized what had just happened, he panicked. But Seeker rammed the blunt top of his pickaxe to Harker's throat. Alion will be working for me now. Thank you. Seeker curtly turned back after doing the light thrust. He then tossed the metal over to Alion. Alion had a confused look and stared at the metal. What's this for? Alion asked in surprise. What do you think? Seeker smiled. Chapter 33. The Planted Seeds. Harker was coughing at the sudden strike. He glared angrily at Seeker once he recovered from the suffocating experience. I don't understand. Alion gave an even more confused look. Why was his father so mad? Seeker turned back to Harker, ignoring the odd look of Alion. Oh, in general, the red gemstone. Please. This very thing could just save your life. Harker glared angrily at Seeker, but said nothing. He rubbed his throat as he tried to soothe the pain. Harker immediately opened his desk drawer and slid a part of the board to reveal a secret compartment containing 3 large gemstones in a glass container. How did you even find out about these gemstones? Harker asked candidly as he opened the containers. You have more than one? Call it a lucky guess. I just need the red one. Seeker smiled. A large, beautiful crimson-red jewel is taken out of the container and Harker tossed it to Seeker. Thank you, General. See you tomorrow. Seeker turned around to leave. See you tomorrow, Mississippi. Seeker smiled as he sped off to the exit. Only then did Alion realize what Seeker had done. Alion quickly turned and threw the metal back to Seeker's departing figure. Harker frowned at this action. Seeker caught it without looking. It's better if that's with you. Alion smiled. Seeker waved back as he walked towards the end of the hallway. Seeker slowly disappeared at the turn of the corner. A man stood at the roof of an abandoned building near the factory. He noticed 4 other individuals in the area and seemed to be waiting. If these were the young master's friends, then he'd be dead if he hurt them. He sighed and waited. All his life, he feared only 2 individuals. A terrifying assassin that made his skills look like that of a child and his master, the dragon. Now, however, a 3rd person rose from the shadows that instilled fear in his heart. This person was definitely weaker than his master or the assassin, but all that Sting could do was scratch this person. and that was taking into account that this person never intended to kill him. Sting heard an unusual sound at the edge of the factory. He readied his senses to identify the direction of the fleeing figure. Sting frowned. The movement of this footsteps outdid even his own techniques. Perhaps only his master and the assassin could match this person's foot technique. Strangely, this fleeing figure was headed straight to him. Sting sighed in depression. He was about a decade older than this person, but this person's sensing technique far outclassed his. Truly worthy of being master's son, Sting smiled. He was sitting in a meditative position, but stood up. Before him stood the very figure he was locking onto. Sting, it's a good thing you waited for me. Actually, it's a bad thing. I should kill you. But considering this would make my life so much easier, I guess it's a good thing. Seeker smiled calmly as he approached the sitting assassin. Sting's calm face suddenly turned to one with horror. How has this one offended young master? He gave a respectful bow immediately. I told you not to follow me, and yet you waited for me here. No doubt to observe my movements. Have you been eavesdropping at my friends? Seeker smiled. A chilling sensation started to build up. Sting knew this was Seeker's aura. Young master, please forgive me. He knew he couldn't lie his way out of this. Don't worry. As I said, with the recent turn of events, it looks like this will help me. Is this what you came for? Seeker held out a bright red gemstone and smiled. The dragon was a collector of bright red gemstones. Could it be that Harker managed to acquire one gemstone that Ming had been looking for and sent Sting to retrieve it? Sting was not only a skilled assassin, but he was a master of concealment. He could have sneaked out of the torture chamber and pilfered the gemstone without alerting anybody. Seeker continued to extend and reveal the gemstone. Seconds pass, and later a minute has passed, and Sting continued to prostrate himself as Seeker held the bright stone. Seeker frowned. Sting, answer me. A commanding tone came out of the impatient Seeker. Sting started to shiver. Young master, forgive me. I cannot see what that is, so I don't know what that is. Sting gave an embarrassed and at the same time a terrorized plea. Seeker facepalmed himself. Of course, Sting couldn't tell what this object was. He was blind. Seeker had a lifetime worth of memories, the training and teachings from the best and the brightest, and the power known as the unlocking. Yet all of these still couldn't cure Seeker from the lapses of stupidity he had from time to time. This is a crimson red gemstone. Did Mr. Ming send you to steal this? Seeker continued to ask. Sting was shocked and looked excitedly at the gem Seeker held. Young master, would your grace allow? Please bestow that gemstone upon your humble servant. Of course. That way you would have completed your mission and you don't need to report on my interruption. Report that someone was attacking the factory which allowed you to sneak in and steal this. Young master, forgive me. This isn't a mission. I had known that he had been seeking beautiful gemstones recently, and so I decided that after I completed my mission in this country, I'd steal a gemstone and offer it as a gift when I returned. I learned of 3 gemstones that General Harker had acquired illegally. Since already stolen gemstones can't be reported, it would not go against the no exposure rule that my master has set. Seeker had a confused look after hearing the explanation. Then why were you caught? I tried to take it by force and knocked out the men, but later more soldiers arrived. Seeker raised an eyebrow. How could you not have heard the arriving soldiers? Sting sighed with an embarrassed look. The location had great acoustics, so I couldn't hear what was going on outside of the building. When the soldiers came in, I knew that I would need to kill in order to left. So I pretended to be a helpless blind man and steal all the gemstones later, Sting explained. Now that's just pitiful and embarrassing. And to think that you call yourself an assassin. Seeker shook his head in disappointment. Sting sat down silently. Still, that's one heck of an acoustic setup, Seeker commended. Indeed it was. The frustrated assassin could not help but agree. So you weren't in some secret mission, but out to get your boss a good present, huh? Seeker gave a frustrated sigh. And here Seeker was thinking that Dragon had personally sent the man. And then, it hit Seeker. Wait, all gemstones? Seeker asked in surprise. Yes. Not just the red one? Or is it a matter of you being blind? I have heard that Master collects gemstones of all colors. Sting bowed. Seeker thought for a bit. This just didn't make any sense. After a bit of contemplation, Seeker then smiled. The creation of the grand picture surfaced in Seeker's mind. If Seeker took advantage of this, then he would reap a lot of benefits. I think I know why your boss has been out seeking beautiful gems. All right, I have a message for your boss, but don't tell your boss that it came from his son. It would be troublesome if this dear OL dad of mine would chase me. Understand? Seeker immediately released a wave of killing intent. Yes, young master. Sting immediately answered. You are to report everything else to Dad except my identity. Tell Dad that an agent working for Linux needed the other 2 jewels. Your master will only need the red one. Also, be sure to inform him that based on my observations, all he needs is that red jewel. Craft it in the necessary gold and silver ornaments, and it should suffice. Seeker instructed. Sting nodded. He was sighing in his mind. His master would definitely punish him. Who would have thought that young master was a subordinate of Linux? What if some misunderstanding would occur and cause the dragon and Linux to clash? After all, Sting knew his master was avoiding this at all cost, but didn't really understand why. Young master, if I may speak, you can take the jewel. Master didn't need it in the first place, and I have done this by my own volition. No, it's you who don't understand, Sting. What I'm saying is it's this very jewel that your master needs. He will definitely praise you soon. He just doesn't know it yet. Remember, I am your master's son. I know what he plans to do with that jewel, so I'm doing you a favor. It will also greatly aid your master. The only concern is if he will listen. But if he finds out I work for Linux, he definitely will listen. Also, when the time comes, and you will know when that will be, you will tell your master that it was me who gave you this jewel. Sting nodded despite his confusion. Now go, and please don't try to follow me or my friends. I will find out if you do. Seeker tossed the jewel. Sting caught it and bowed once more. As you command, young master. Farewell. A blur could be seen as Sting started moving with accurate ninja-like speed and sneak. Seeker smiled as Sting disappeared. He had planted the seeds. When harvest time comes, he would reap a lot of benefits. Seeker returned to the car to meet up with his friends. Well, how was it? Charles spoke as he noticed Seeker coming out of the darkness. Just call me a master seed planter. Seeker smiled. Zeke, you got wounded, Lind exclaimed. Relax. It's not from Harker's men. This one came from an assassin who was already in the building. An assassin? Who was the target of this assassin? Merrill worriedly grasped Seeker's arm. It's complicated. A big misunderstanding, really. But all these misunderstandings have aided me greatly. Now Harker will obediently listen to me. I didn't really need to make an effort to make him believe my lies. Seeker laughed. Sounds like you had a good night. Charles smiled. It is. With the way things are now, I don't need to act subtly on Harker's programmed slaves. Oh, right. Here you go, Lind. Seeker tossed a medal to Lind. Lind caught it and observed it. He wiped the medal clean and was observing every detail of it. What is this? Lind asked. You didn't press it, did you? That's Alion's programmed slave kill switch. One wrong move and Alion would have a heart failure. Seeker casually remarked as he sat on the front seat of the car. Immense fear jolted Lind's casual temperament. What? Zeke, I pressed it, Lind shouted. Seeker laughed. Just kidding. No need to worry. Zeke, I hate you. I thought this really was the kill switch. Oh, it really is a kill switch. Harker probably set it to a voice command which only he could trigger. Otherwise, a careless press could kill his daughter. Seeker started munching on the burgers that were prepared for Seeker's post-adventure. Lind's hand was petrified and didn't know what to do with the kill switch. Lucky you, Lind. You now have direct access to Alion's heart. Merrill teased in glee. All right, enough of that. Cliff, any word on your little errand? Cliff always had a weary and alert expression. Listening to the discussions of the three gave him confusion except for one clear reality. Don't mess with Seeker Carlean. Yes, they confirmed your suspicions. All 8 were sent to one hospital. The Meglanila Hospital, Cliff reported. All? Interesting. That raises the possibility that all foreign exchange students are programmed slaves. Seeker had a devilishly pleasant smile. What? Charles was alarmed at the number. But that's over 100 students. Merrill exclaimed. Yes, and soon they will all be mine. Seeker then gave a creepy laugh that a mad, evil villain in TV would do. Chapter 34. To Feel and Hear. Seeker was whistling a happy tune. He entered the dark halls of an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. He would shout at times to hear the echoes of the building. He moved out of the halls into the open field of the building. The building was one of Harker's former drug labs. As suspicions arose to the use of the building, Harker immediately abandoned it. Now all that remains are empty halls and what could only be described as a labyrinth of halls and passages. Nice place. This will do for today's activity. Seeker smiled. On his waist was a pair of the mountain climber's pickaxes. Seeker slowly held it. Allianz stood there with a frowning expression. With just a simple call, she had to organize a field trip which excused Seeker and his gang along with Cliff. Charles also arrived with an almost dead expression. Seeker, I'm at the brink of a discovery in my research. Are you sure that this little exercise will help me finish this faster? Charles frowned. He clearly hadn't slept much last night. Merrill, Lind, and Cliff wondered why they were included in this trip. Of course, if anything, it could speed the research twice as fast. For now, please gather and put all the weapons out here. Seeker smiled. The guns or my weapon collection? Charles asked. Both of them. Seeker then started to do several stretching movements. He grasped the mountain climbing pickaxes and started to run towards the wall of the building. The same scaling technique was applied, and in less than a minute, Seeker reached the top of the building. Everyone stared in shock at Seeker's fast movements. No one saw how Seeker managed to infiltrate the factory last night, and now they knew. What are you doing? I need you to get the weapons out now, Seeker ordered. The group below stood for a while and started to move as they shook their heads. They couldn't believe how easy it was for Seeker to do that. Seeker sat down on the roof and gazed at the view of the city. There were other buildings nearby, however, as this was mainly contained industrial buildings used during the colonist wars. The buildings were now mainly used as storage for various companies. There was virtually no one nearby on this part of the city. Seeker sat down and dove deep into his memories. He envisioned the past in his mind. Realm King. Seeker sighed. Seeker watched his memory as if he was watching a movie. Before him stood the Realm King, the world champion in which he served under for the majority of his tenure as a soldier. 50 meters with hearing and 30 with feeling, huh? The Realm King smiled. This is the best I can do, General. Seeker saluted. It's not the best. The Inhuman stage could allow users to maximize their senses to a point that you can theoretically reach 100 meters alone in feeling. The Realm King laughed. Seeker grumbled. What was he compared to, a monster? General, isn't it a bit unreasonable to set your standard on me? It's not unreasonable. It's possible. What is it that the men called me these days? Omnipresent within 2 kilometers, sir, Seeker responded. What do you think I used to reach that? Hearing. Feeling, Seeker. Seeker had a shocked look. So you feel the presences of everyone using feeling? But how can you determine their plans and action? At my stage, I can interpret sounds based on the vibrations into hearing. You see, sounds can be blocked. At some point, no matter how good you are at hearing, you will fail to comprehend the meaning of these muffled sounds. So you feel sounds? Seeker asked in confusion. Yes. Didn't you listen to Charles's lecture? He called it realm somatotopy, the ability to feel everything within a given area. I know about realm somatotopy. Anyone in the Inhuman stage could do that at about 5 meters. But none of them can detect sounds, General. Even ranked heroes. Seeker gave a depressed sigh. The Realm King laughed. Well, some ranked heroes can. The Realm King teased. Seeker just frowned and just gave an impatient look to the Realm King. The trick is to master the echolocation and master realm somatotopy. And then you need to find a way to connect the echolocation map to the somatotopic map. Once you combine these two, then you would finally have a chance at becoming like me. Seeker continued to give the impatient look at the Realm King's teases. You see, in the end, sounds can be blocked, but its vibrations could still resound. Even if it strikes a wall, it vibrates. If you are sensitive enough, you could feel the vibrations and echoes of sound and interpret it. Interpret vibrations? You can understand what people say when all that you could hear are vibrations. Seeker asked again. Seeker then paused and quickly scrutinized the logical correctness of his statement. Didn't Beethoven did it? He used his sense of touch to feel the vibrations of each key, and he later managed to produce masterpieces. Imagine the possibilities if an unlocked mind could master this. I wonder what kind of champion Beethoven would have been if he was alive now. The Realm King laughed. So I need to feel the sound and try to find a way to interpret it? Seeker asked. The Realm King gave a happy nod. Seeker sighed. This task was hard to reach. They had no time to train. Too bad I'm not one of them believers. If I was, it would have been possible, and this talk would have more usefulness. It would. But I don't like the idea of you being a believer. You enjoy the climb more than the peak. That is your strength, Seeker. Someday, I'm sure it will prove useful to you. Seeker smiled once more, and his consciousness returned him to his present self standing on the roof. He had reached the surmounting stage of the ranked hero then, and had the experience to understand how echolocation works and could use realm somatotopy at an experience level. But at the moment that Seeker died, as his unlocking soared to uncharted levels, for a brief second, managed to experience the fusion of these two. Experience leads to understanding, and understanding to knowledge, and knowledge to control. General, I can finally walk on your footsteps. Seeker smiled softly. Seeker closed his eyes and focused his senses. He was subtly closing the senses of his smell, his sight, and even his touch. His hearing senses were pushed to the maximum. Using his memories as the foundation, Seeker recalled how his hearing would reach an impressive range of nearly 20 meters. He could hear and even make a mental map of what was happening down the building. The sounds mapped out the movements of Cliff, who carried several weapons which Seeker could make out as axes and swords. The objects that Lind was carrying with caution was an assault rifle that was exclusively used by the military. Seeker could make out the design based on the shape of the gun. This is it. Echolocation. Seeker took a deep breath as he struggled to maintain this state. Seeker then stopped using echolocation and blocked his sense of hearing. He slowly blocked all his senses, leaving the sense of touch active. Realm somatotopy. Seeker started to push his sense of touch to the maximum. Seeker could feel everything within 10 meters. Occasionally, some of his friends would enter this range, and Seeker could feel their presence. He knew where they were and what they were doing. He could barely make a mental map, but with the experience of his memories, he could immediately interpret it into a clearer image. Seeker ended his state. He gripped his fist in preparation for the merging of these two. He remembered the feeling, but now he would try to combine these two. Seeker opened his sense of hearing and sense of touch and pushed both to the maximum. It was chaos. Seeker convulsed at the strange sensation he felt. He felt as if he wasn't in his current position any longer. Unlike the experience of having an out-of-body experience where he could see the area around him, Seeker felt as if he was everywhere within 10 meters. His convulsion almost made Seeker faint. Seeker stopped the merging of these two, and to his horror, he was falling down. Seeker immediately took the pickaxe he held and smashed it on the wall. Seeker almost reached the ground when he was clinging to it. Zeke, Lind, and Merrill cried as they rushed to their friend. Seeker let go of the pickaxe and fell to the ground. He lay flat on the ground and was gasping for breath. He managed to feel the sensation of the fuse, but his head was now throbbing in pain. What happened? Charles ran and asked Seeker. Don't worry, guys. Seeker spoke as he tried to catch his breath. I'm all right. I just did something reckless. Seeker smiled as he tried to sit up. His head continued to spin. He could occasionally feel the area through his hearing and his touch. Seeker laid on his back once again. His world was spinning. He opened his eyes and gazed tiredly at the clouds. It was then he saw it. What the? Seeker reacted. He continued to fix his eyes on the sky as if trying to find something. Everyone around him turned and gazed to the sky at the direction that Seeker was looking. Seeker frowned. Is something wrong? Charles asked with a worried tone. I can't see it, but I'm sure it's there. Alion, give me a sniper rifle. Seeker commanded angrily. Alion was startled at Seeker's angry tone and rushed to grab the gun. Seeker closed his eyes once more and started to breathe deeply. He relaxed his entire body. Soon he managed to stabilize his sensation. Seeker stood up and reached for the gun that Alion carried. Seeker took the pickaxe that still hung on the floor. With one hand, he carried the rifle, and with the other, he used the same scaling technique. This time, Seeker was hitting for the holes that he already made. Since he didn't have to strike hard, Seeker was able to easily manage the rise with only one pickaxe. Seeker swiftly reached the roof of the building. He then positioned himself far into the middle area in case he would convulse again. Seeker continued to keep his eyes open. Seeker then aimed the gun high. It didn't look like he was aiming for anything. What are you doing, Zeke? Merrill shouted. Seeker looked around the area as if he was looking for something. Seeker was shivering. He could barely manage this state. Found ya. Seeker aimed at an elevated position and fired 3 bullets at the sky. It was a strange sight for the group below. Seeker didn't even use the scope. Inside a building a few blocks away from where Seeker and his team was, 2 men were observing Seeker through a computer. What's he doing? I don't know. He seems to be aiming at something. Didn't he look directly at the drone? Idiot. Look where he's aiming. Is shooting. Just what is he aiming at? I don't know dash. Pong, pong, pong. 3 bullets pierced through the slightly opened window. 1 bullet pierced through the computer and destroyed it. Another pierced through the first soldier's left leg, while the other pierced through the soldier's right arm. The first soldier cried in surprise. The second showed his tenure as he quickly dashed for cover and grabbed a radio-like device. General, we are under attack. Seeker is shooting at us. The panicked soldier reported. Seeker reached the ground as he used his left hand to hook himself and to disrupt his free fall. Alian, tell your dad I won't be so generous next time. Seeker spoke as he walked towards the weapon shack. A crashing sound was then heard near their area. The group turned near the south side of the building and could now see an object that would blink intermittently to reveal itself. It's a military-grade drone. Alian cried in shock. Chapter 35. Forced Unlocking. The fallen drone had a sophisticated pseudo-cloaking technology made possible through innovative camouflaging features. Cloaking-level camouflage, eh? Charles shook his head, seeing how the fallen drone would blink from being visible to invisible. He knew drones like these were expensive. Alian immediately shuffled to call her father. General Dash, thanks Seeker for sparing my men's lives. Ask if we can retrieve the drone. Harker immediately spoke. He can send his men to pick it up after we are finished here. It's not damaged beyond repair. Seeker responded loudly as if he heard what Harker was saying over the phone. Thank you. Harker responded as he could overhear Seeker's cold voice. And if you do spy on me again, I won't be so generous. Seeker angrily spoke. Harker was silent on the other line. Alian abruptly hangs up the phone and stood silently. You managed to see something that is practically invisible. Charles commended. I couldn't see. It was more of seeing and feeling, I guess. Whatever. That was very unsettling. I better not enter that state with my current level. Seeker sighed. Geez, Zeke, you almost died there. Be more careful when you try things like those. Meryl scolded. I'm sorry. I didn't expect it would be that bad. I can't believe the Realm King could easily do that without getting all queasy. Seeker frowned. It was almost impossible for him to remain in that state. I guess it's not that easy to follow on the footsteps of a world champion. Here I am with all my advantages, and I'm not even sure if I can make it to that realm. Seeker sighed. What are you talking about? Alian interjected. You'll find out in a bit. Seeker smiled. Everyone had a confused look. All right, Zeke, I think it's about time you tell us why we had to come here. The weapons are all in place. I can't help but worry with all the military surveillance and the weapon we have here. Meryl spoke bluntly. Right now, what we need to do is to unlock. What do you mean to unlock? Lind had a curious look. You see, in preparation of the coming battles, we need 2 things. First, I need to push my unlocking further. How? I thought that my research would be the key to improving your unlocking. Charles asked immediately. You are right. We need your tech to open the unlocking to everyone. It is almost impossible for people to reach the unbecoming stage in their entire life, much less the inhuman stage. You can't train to reach that position. But because of my unique circumstance, I can. Seeker asked. Cliff and Alian had a confused look at the question, but noticing that this hasn't startled the rest, they kept quiet. So how do you improve your unlocking? Constant use. I need to improve my foundation on almost everything. I realized that forcing higher levels of the unlocking could be detrimental to my overall potential. In the future, what we needed were more unlocked individuals. We rushed into things. But now, I have the opportunity to hone my skills. So I need to constantly allow myself to use these skills in actual battle. I see. It's like you're rebuilding your foundation. Charles analyzed. Seeker nodded. He then went towards the guns and ammo. However, being in this state offers a lot of responsibilities. It means that I have to understand how to effectively use all weapons. After all, I can't build an army if I don't know how to train them. Seeker immediately took an assault rifle and started to observe every inch of it. The second thing I need is to experiment how I can stimulate the unlocking without relying on your research, Charles. I believe that people who have been unlocked prior to having you rework their brain would allow them to have a higher chance of reaching ranked hero. Seeker started selecting from the guns displayed. So you mean to stimulate people's brain to which they can reach beyond the 10% norm? Yes. The question is, how do we force a person to reach this state? The group was silently contemplating. Alion and Cliff listened intently to their discussion, although they couldn't make heads or tails of where this discussion was about. Maybe have them fight a lot? Martial artists and athletes have this right, so why not do what they do? Lynn suggested. That would take years though, and the increase is too small. Not to mention it will only aid in some parts of their perception. Seeker shook his head. What I need is something that will push the brain to an extreme level of stress. Seeker smiled. Charles frowned at this suggestion. I got it. What if they encounter life-threatening situations? Didn't you mention stuff about OB and life reviews a result of pushing their brains beyond the 10%? Merrill shouted. That is true, but it's almost impossible to achieve that. Charles countered. Merrill frowned. How is it impossible? Charles is correct. Doing what you suggest is difficult, Seeker said as he removed the silencer from the gun barrel. How is that difficult? We can scare them or something. Let's just have them face a lot of dangerous situations, and they should have those. Charles shook his head. That's what I'm saying. It isn't as simple as putting them in a dangerous situation. I served on several tours during my days as an army doctor. I had a lot of close calls, but I never experienced either of those. Then what could cause that? Lind asked curiously. It has to be a feeling where they would genuinely think that they would die. If their brains are pushed to that point of mortality, they would probably push beyond the norm. Oh, that sounds reckless. What could make them think that they are sure to die? We'd have to do something really bad to them to make them think that. It's not only reckless, but it's dangerous. Unless we have a way to ensure that no one would die while performing this experiment, then we cannot use that. Oh, so we can't do that, Merrill sighed. Bang, bang, bang. A bullet flew and grazed Lynn's left cheek. A bullet grazed Charles's left arm, and Merrill stumbled in shock when he heard an ear-piercing gunshot right at her ears. Before any one of them could shout, a strange, choking sensation stopped them from doing it. Everyone looked at the source of the gunshots, and they froze when they saw Seeker. He was holding several guns, and a lot of weapons were protruding through a small bag he was wearing. What was scary was that he shot the three with blindfolds on. Actually, we can. A terrifying sensation overcame Merrill, and she almost fell to the floor in fear. Seeker had an almost demonic grin. Everyone was gripped with fear. Lynn saw the wound on his cheek and gazed at Seeker, who was now wearing blindfolds. He felt a spine-chilling sensation. Finally, the sensations that he or Merrill never felt were now experienced in a horrifying level. I can create fear as well as imitate a life-threatening situation. I can make it that it would look so believable that the said lab rats will either achieve a state of unlocking or die from a heart attack. Seeker laughed as he placed the silencer back to the handgun. And most importantly, I can also ensure that no one will die in this situation. Seeker was slowly approaching Merrill. Merrill wanted to shout, but Seeker's aura was too strong. She slowly crawled backward as Seeker approached. I hope none of you will suffer from post-traumatic stress after this. Oh well, it's a risk I'm willing to take. I don't need weakness in the upcoming battles. I'll count to 5. After that, I begin my massacre. Use whatever weapons against me, Seeker ordered as he posed to a stance which was ready to shoot. Charles and Alion were the first to scramble towards the weapon. Get up, Charles shouted towards Merrill. 5. Lind was petrified and couldn't move. He turned around to see Cliff limping towards the weapon shack. He was too far from the guns, and that was also too near from the devil incarnate. Help me, Merrill cried hysterically. 4. Alion took the gun, and without warning opened fire. Seeker didn't even have to move as Alion's shaking hands couldn't aim properly. 3. Merrill was lifted up by a slow-moving Lind. Charles also started to shoot at Seeker. Seeker was easily evading the bullets despite being blindfolded. He was using both echolocation and realm somatopy at the same time. However, he did not merge the two. 2. You got to try harder, guys. I need a more stimulating practice. Seeker smiled. Lind and Merrill were struggling to get inside the building. Cliff now had a long steel bat, but was also rushing for the door. 1. Alian's cry was the first thing that Lind heard. He struggled to move faster. Meryl managed to jolt her mind back in order and managed to get control of her body. She then started running faster. Lind started running faster as he noticed Meryl's recovery. Several gunshots continued to resound as the pair dashed for the door. Cliff was just about to reach it ahead when a bullet pierced through the ground he was about to step on. The surprise caused Cliff to lose his balance, and he stumbled and rolled on the dirt. 2 bullets grazed the legs of Lind and Meryl, and the sheer fright they felt to the grazing bullet caused them to stumble. "Weak, I guess I'll just kill you," Seeker roared insanely as he shot more rounds across the place. An hour later, Seeker finally removed the blindfold. "That was a very helpful exercise. I think I managed to improve my use of both echolocation and realm somatotopy." A carefree tune followed as Seeker happily whistled. He started to return the guns to its proper place, making sure to check that it was not damaged. "Excuse me, Meryl," Seeker spoke in passing as he walked over a hysterically crying Meryl who was clutching one leg of the table where the guns were placed. "Mama, Mama," Meryl continued to sob. On the table, the guns were in a mess. Seeker started to slowly arrange it in order. On the right side of the table, Charles was lying flat, staring up the skies. Seeker had jumped over him and drove a large knife down his face, but would stop just in time. However, each time he did that, Charles could feel the wind piercing through. Seeker then continued to stab on him, barely scraping the skin of his neck. The sensation of experiencing the moment of his death over 20 times left him dull and unmoving. "You all right, Charles? I figured since you're the most experienced in this group, I should give you special treatment," Seeker laughed. Around the corner of the building, Alian lay unconscious. She rested quite peacefully. Unlike Charles, who managed to stay conscious, she lost hers on the 3rd time Seeker blasted a gun at her face. Seeker's handling was precise. He would thrust the gun as close as he can towards Alian's face, and at the last second would change the angle of the gun to ensure that Alian wouldn't get hit. Lind was vomiting at an area beside Alian. When he saw Seeker holding Alian by the hair and was about to shoot at her face, he ran and tried to impale Seeker with a large pike he got from the weapon shack. Seeker used a strange technique and managed to snatch the pike away from Lind. Lind thought that Seeker had impaled him twice and shot him in the chest twice, but for some reason, though his chest hurt, he had no wounds. Cliff was barely keeping his consciousness. His pants were wet. He thought Seeker shot him at the head, so he remained lifeless, waiting for his death with an empty bladder. "All right, guys, let's have a 15-minute water break. I'll just reload these guns and repair whatever damage there is to the surrounding weapons, and we will start again." Seeker smiled. All who were conscious fainted at Seeker's declaration. Chapter 36. The Taste of Dying. Seeker was dripping with sweat. There were several gun holes around the area. Tables were overturned, windows shattered, and a lot of swords, knives, and even axes was scattered throughout the area. "I guess we should call it a day. I need to eat a lot of food before we start today's stream," Seeker finally said as he removed the blindfolds. His companions weren't as well off as Seeker was. Lind and Meryl lay unconscious on the floor. This time, Alian was conscious as she was gripping a handgun tightly. She dared not let it go. Though it had been empty for about 10 minutes, the continuous fear just made her grip it and pull the trigger relentlessly. Charles and Cliff were lying directly in front of Seeker. Cliff carried an assault rifle while Charles had a handgun and a large knife on hand. Both of them continued to shiver. Seeker hadn't been using his aura, but after what was 4 hours of continuous fighting, the fear never seemed to leave them. Seeker relaxed and started to clean up the mess that they had left. The place clearly looked like it went through a war zone. After 10 minutes, Alian finally rose and slowly crept towards Seeker. Her steps were very unstable, like a newborn baby who just learned how to walk. Cliff and Charles did not make any effort to move. They just laid there as if they knew death was imminent. "Who are you?" Alian cried out. She was turning hysterical. She had quite a lot of dangerous moments considering her job dealt with the military and her father's business. But those moments were nothing to the 4-hour fighting she had just experienced again and again. Their training encompassed several sessions. Each session began with a time limit of 10 minutes. But Seeker kept continuously increasing the time after several sessions. The last sessions were 30 minutes long. Each succeeding sessions brought more satisfactory results. At first, Lind and Merrill would just pass out or run away at the first attacks, but they were later able to fight back. You should ask Charles when he's all right, Seeker answered casually as he continued to pick up the weapons. Charles slowly stood up and was walking towards Lind and Merrill. It was his job to check on the psychological and mental states of each other. As he approached the two, to his surprise, they were already awake. Lind just continued to close his eyes to calm himself. Merrill, however, was looking directly at the bright sun. It didn't seem to bother her. They look all right, Charles concluded. He turned back to Cliff and observed him. Cliff just gave a sad nod. Did you manage to see it? Seeker finally asked. You could have asked that question the first time. I saw it at that moment you tried to stab me. Your blade seemed slower. I could think faster, and I was able to recall events that even I have forgotten. Charles spoke, but you could only see it, right? You haven't developed a way to make your mind move your body. Time has slowed down, but your body can't keep up. It means you broke through up to the 12%. What we need is 13 in order to be considered at the unbecoming. Hopefully, you'll be able to emulate it after a few more sessions. Perhaps another set of sessions will allow you to control it. Be here on Sunday. So I get a day off because you have to stream, huh? Lucky me. Charles sighed as he sat down on the ground. His clothes were already a mess, so it didn't bother him. Why do I need to be here anyway? Shouldn't I work on my research? If you reach the first unlocked state, then you should progress at least 2 times faster in your research. The mental state that an Advent unbecoming allows you to stay at your mental peak. Regardless if you are sleepy, tired, or bent out of shape, your mind will function as if it was at its optimum state. Charles stared in greed. If he could manage that state, then he wouldn't need to drink all those coffees and could stay awake longer to finish his research. Advent. Yes. Each stage of the unlocking is further divided into 3 ranks. Advent, Proficient, and Surmounting. Advent is at a minimum 13% with a 15% max reach. Proficient in at 15 minimum and 18 maximum. Surmounting requires a minimum of 18 and 23 at max. As you can see, the time you increase in rank is when your maximum becomes the minimum. How far are you at again? Charles asked. I would guess that I could reach 26 at my maximum state, but my minimum should be around 10 or 11. Seeker shrugged. That doesn't make sense. I know. I guess this is the effect of my memories. I assume that my real state should barely touch the proficient rank, but advanced recall seems to be allowing me to reach higher ranks. Truth be told, I don't know the maximum state I can reach, but if I push myself, I would probably die. Seeker laughed. Can anyone tell me what the hell you two are talking about? Alian screamed after being ignored for too long. Everyone except Seeker jolted at the sudden scream. Charles, I guess it's time to let these two into what's been going on. Don't worry. We can trust Alian. I have the keys to her heart. I'll talk to my 2 friends for a bit. Seeker smiled and walked off. Charles sighed and motioned for Alian and Cliff to follow him. He decided to change venues as he could tell what Seeker intended based on his serious expressions. Seeker approached his 2 friends who gave him a curious look. They were still laying down on the ground lifelessly. They seemed to have no intention of moving. So how were the near-death experiences? Seeker smiled. The 2 gave an angry gaze at Seeker. You promised that you wouldn't get us involved in anything dangerous. Lind breathed in anger. I never promised that. I just told you that you can quit being my helper. Seeker smiled. The 2 were silent at Seeker's response. Merrill started to cry again. I don't want this. Merrill sobbed. You don't want what? The training? Or the fact that you almost died? Seeker asked again with a smiling expression. Because if it's the first one, I can stop. If it's the second one, you'd encounter it sooner or later. Things are just going to get downhill from here, Merrill. People will die left and right. Heck, even world champions died. We have you, don't we? Merrill argued. A strange, gripping sensation once again enveloped the 2. Seeker's expression took a drastic turn. Seeker's angry look caused the 2 to shudder. You think that just because I've gotten a hold of a set of awesome memories that we are all set right? You're wrong. We're pressed with time. So far, what we have are weapons and funding. But let me tell you right here and then, that wouldn't mean anything. You think these weapons can damage the technology the Aragarians will deploy? Seeker held the rifle in his hands. These were nothing. Their metal is unbreakable, their weapons, unimaginable, and their numbers, uncountable. What can these puny weapons do in the face of their onslaught? Seeker threw the weapons towards the lying two in anger. What we really need are unlocked individuals. And we don't have the time to wait for Charles. We were dying. I died. Me, a ranked hero. And you two just want to ride along with my wave and think you'll be safe? That's stupid. I never asked to be a part of this. Lind erupted in anger. We aren't fighters. We told you. We aren't like you royals. If we die, then we die. We've long accepted it. We are fine with dying. Lind shouted. Smash. Seeker buried his foot in Lind's stomach. He raised his foot ready to strike again. Then let me kill you now. Seeker shouted back. Lind shivered in fear and didn't even react to the pain. The amount of fear he felt surpassed any of his previous moments during the training. He started to crawl away. The only thing in his mind was to escape Seeker. Why are you running? Seeker jumped on the path that Lind was headed and stomped on Lind's back. Lind's face was buried in the ground. Seeker withdrew his aura. Lind couldn't move as Seeker pressed hard on his foot. Meryl had a shocked expression on her face. She too felt the same fear that Seeker gave. You think dying is such a simple thing? Look at you. When I tried to kill you, you ran away. It isn't that easy, Lind. Dying isn't an easy escape. If you die, then your parents could die, your friends could die, even Alion could die. Who knows? Meryl might die right in front of you, and you will just gnash your teeth and weep because you are weak. Seeker stomped once more. Lind was struggling to get up, but Seeker's stomp anchored him. I hope you see Meryl's brains splattered right in front of you, so you would know how it felt for me to see you die the first time. Seeker turned to Meryl, who continued crying. You too. You think that because you're a small little girl you get a pass at these things, right? Well, I hope that excuse would be useful once you carry your mom and dad's arms and fingers not knowing what happened to the rest. Seeker jumped over and kicked Meryl in the stomach. She clutched her stomach in pain, but her tears were continued pouring like a fountain. Of course, she wasn't crying about the pain. I already told you of my fears of the future. We aren't any closer to winning even with all this new game advantage. Especially now, with the dragon looming on my horizon. I'm good as dead if I face him on my own. The people under him are as strong as those in the unbecoming stage. I might not even make it trying to meet the dragon. Seeker took Lind by the hair and threw him towards Meryl. Get up, you worthless giant. Lind's eyes were red in anger and in tears. He gazed at Seeker with an angry expression. Why are you angry? I'm supposed to be the one that's angry. I have to face off with one of the most dangerous criminals this world has produced with his team of assassins and killers, and what do I have? 2 weak friends who would rather die. Are you still using your regular status as an excuse? It doesn't matter if you're regular, rising, or royal. You will all die. Seeker spoke harshly. Lind continued to glare while Meryl continued to sob. Maybe now that you've gotten a taste of what it feels like to die, you would understand. Dying is not an escape. It is not a release. It doesn't take away all the worries you had of this world. It actually accomplishes the very thing you are worried about, because you won't be there to stop it. Seeker punched Lind on the face flatly. And those who you leave behind will suffer. Seeker met Lind's glare. He then grabbed on Lind's collar and lifted Lind towards himself. So is this how you repay my good graces in trying to turn you into warriors? Wishing you were dead? Then if that's what you want, cut off our friendship so I wouldn't care when you die. Make me hate you so much that when you die, I'd smile and laugh it off. Because I've suffered enough in watching you two die. I'd rather kill myself now than see you two die again. Seeker shouted angrily. Tears were falling from his eyes. As Lind stared at Seeker's eyes, he could see the pain that his friend felt. This wasn't Seeker being inconsiderate. This was Seeker being scared. Meryl continued to cry at Seeker's painful remarks. But the sight of the unmovable Seeker crying made her clutch her heart in pain. Seeker gazed at Lind's softening expression and at Meryl's controlled hysteria. I need you guys to succeed in the unlocking. I can't do the next missions alone. Someone has to keep the dragon's men busy while I face that monster. Can I count on you? Seeker asked calmly. The two was silent at first, but then Meryl and Lind slowly nodded. Lind sighed. I'm sorry for being such a useless friend, Zeke. I'll do my best to meet your expectations. Lind mumbled softly. Meryl simply nodded. If she tried to speak, she would simply just cry and make unintelligible cries. Seeker smiled at his two friends. His plans worked. The exposure to fear managed to shake his friends into a good and trainable state. Seeker gave them a moment of silence to get their emotions in order. Have either of you experienced any of those unlocked sensations during our training? Seeker asked after a long pause. Merrill nodded while Lind shook his head. Seeker gave a peculiar look at Lind. Lind looked away as he was embarrassed at the outcome. Seeker just sighed and turned to Merrill. Merrill, you always boasted about how you can tolerate bright light. Has it improved? Merrill gave a curious look. She stared at the sun for a while. Seeker continued to observe Merrill. Merrill was shocked. It's strange. The sun's brightness doesn't seem to hurt anymore. Seeker smiled. Things were advancing smoothly. Chapter 37. Pangean Politics. Harker took one look at the surroundings and frowned. He had heard reports that there were sounds of weapons being fired at this area. Thankfully, his soldiers managed to contain the commotion with claims that it was some practice. He immediately spotted his main concern. The drone was placed on the table, and it looked like it didn't receive much damage from the crash apart from the damaged wing. Harker sighed in relief. Now, Harker, let's get down to business. I'll ignore your spying attempts and hope that that served as a valuable lesson. Seeker smiled. Harker clutched his fist. The last thing that the drone captured was Seeker firing 3 rounds of bullets which wounded his men. What was interesting was how Seeker didn't use the scope of the gun. Now, General, on to business. You know about Pangean politics more than I do. Who's who in the political arena? Seeker asked. Every politician in this damned country. That's why I never meddled with politics. Generals, national managers, vice-national managers. We all know that the Pangean nations has the most unique government system. Even I wouldn't know where to start or who to deal with. I was never interested in having that kind of power anyway. Your advantage is your silence in this matter. Given your very cautious nature, no one would expect you, the silent and headstrong general, to aim for the presidential seat. So who has the highest chances of being president if President Kolstar is voted out? Hiron of the Indo-Pangean, Harker answered without missing a beat. But it's impossible. Granted the nature of our country, he needs to hold at least more than half of the senators in each Pangean nation in order to have a shot at winning. As I said, your disinterest makes it the most appealing nature. Prove yourself as a man of this Pangean nation. If you reach a status similar to that of a hero when Kolstar gets voted out, you'd probably be nominated by Hiron. Should you accept? A hero? Wars like that don't come easily, Seeker. Oh, don't worry about that. The best way to temporarily halt Dragon's advances is to start a war. If he sees strange movement within this nation, he will have to think twice before rallying his forces in, especially if you get deployed on foreign land to fight the war. But there are no wars, Harker answered again, trying to sound as respectful as he can. I said don't worry. I'll start one. If things go according to plan, then by this time next week, we should be having one. There was silence. Everyone present continued to stare at Seeker. It's none of your concern. Seeker laughed as he noticed the silence. We'll just have to play it by ear. I'm not perfectly sure things will go as intended after all. For now, our main concern is how to get our current president evicted. And how do you propose to do that? Kidnap all media heads of these 3 countries. Turn them into programmed slaves. Once we have that, we can kill his image. I don't get it, Zeke. Why the media heads? Why not kidnap the senators and leaders directly? Too risky. If we aim for the media heads, we would be aiming for only 5 individuals. Going with the senators would take us quite a bit of time and effort. Not to mention the risk of discovery. That's all? Just the media? Merrill asked, unsure of the plan. The media is the making or the breaking of a nation. Seeker smiled. Regardless of how good or reputable a person's character is, it is subject to public opinion. Imagine hearing and reading news about Kolstar every day about his mistakes and blunders. Kolstar has an almost impeccable reputation. He literally is one of the best presidents our country's ever had, Charles voiced out. And yet, because of my plans, he must fall. Doubt, doctor, that is the main goal for now. How can doubt be helpful? Harker asked immediately. He expected a far more complicated plan. Doubt is the ultimate feller of leaders, General. Doubt is the most important ingredient to win the country. Right now, the whole country sees Kolstar as this great president. But mark my words, He isn't the first great president to ever be done in by the media and the horrifying effects of doubt. So let's say we manage to take over these media outlets. What happens then? Harker listened. The media does its magic. Any news event regarding the president can be switched to have a subtle title or presentation which can damage his character. How? Merrill asked with a confused expression. Let's take the current event. The president just denied the ongoing legislative movement concerning to remove the mandatory 13th month pay and make it optional. Almost every news outlet praised this and gave positive news title. Aren't they just reporting it as it is? Lind asked in confusion. President denies appeals for optional 13th month pay, urges companies to promote family time for workers. Seeker recited a title. It's positive news reporting. They shifted the focus on how the president wants to encourage companies to give proper compensation for their workers to have time for their families, especially on the holidays. Right, because that's what it is. Merrill nodded. Really? What if I change the title to President Denies Appeals for Optional 13th Month Pay, January Resignations at an All-Time High? Now I shifted the point of view of this article to show the cons of the article and not its pros. Seeker smiled. But I'm sure the people will see the benefits if they read the whole article. Merrill argued. If they read it. That's the beauty of the media. The government, or specifically the president, cannot charge libel against the media. The whole article may contain it, but how many amongst all readers will read the article? Some will just glance at the title page and create their own interpretation. Merrill couldn't retort after this. She had been doing the same thing after all. The first article title was very positive. In fact, it's hard to find any negative arguments to counter that. But the second article reveals the flaws of the president's move and does not provide anything positive that readers will have to say. And the worst thing is, both news doesn't seem to be biased as it appears to just be reporting the truth. Merrill remained silent at Seeker's example. A simple news article like that will make people question the validity of his move. That's how powerful the media is. It can make something positive look negative, or something negative look positive. Only those with high levels of critical thinking will catch on in this attempt to badmouth the president. But let's be honest. That's not common nowadays. Charles gave a light chuckle agreeing with Seeker. And that's what we'll have all the media do. If one media outlet does it, it can be buffered by another who presents the positive. But imagine if all media outlets present these negative subtle attacks. And the trick is, they don't attack the president directly. They attack his regime. If any of those under him or supports him makes a blunder, they capitalize on that. Put it on the headlines and slap the president's name on board, even if he really has nothing to do with it. Will that work? It worked for the previous president. It was comical, really. A problem at the main highway which caused great traffic and delayed thousands of workers. And then they slapped the president's name on the report. I mean, what has the president have to do with anything in that? Shouldn't the news focus on the traffic and land development organizations? I remember those, but I really hadn't thought about it like that. Merrill contemplated. Harker ignored the casual joining of these other teens. For such a serious topic, Seeker took his time to explain it to these youths. But because Seeker valued their input, he just stood quietly. He noticed Alian has been awfully quiet during this entire discussion. The president may or may not address the issue. A little negative presentation of a good news, and do it constantly, and you can build up the hate for the president. Once that settles in, it would be your time to shine, General. Harker simply nodded. I agree to your estimations. But will doubt be enough to make the people ride on the hate train? It will. By making people doubt his character, it will make those who hate him all the more. Our main concern is how to make the masses hate him then. After all, his current reforms are all quite noble, Charles added. Indeed it is. But any action, regardless of its noble nature, will always cause reactions. He has been focusing on eliminating three things within the Pangean nations: foreign-hating culture, the division between the three nations, and lastly, poverty. So what do you think would be the possible groups that will rally against him? Will anyone want to go against those? They are noble causes after all. Merrill frowned at such a stupid question. Naive. Alian finally spoke. Seeker's right. These three agendas have agitated a large group of people. Indo-Pangea, who has long been the least progressive of the three Pangean nations, hate how they always get the low end of the deal. With Kolstar's attempts in uniting the three nations, the political and rich groups who control Indo-Pangaea will undoubtedly be against this. In fact, we are already seeing several politicians in Indo-Pangaea who has revealed their disdain in this movement. Seeker, you plan to use those groups against Kolstar to stir the fire, correct? Seeker nodded. Malay Pangaea, who had taken the brunt of the damage during the Colonist War, is the most fearful and hateful among the three in regards to foreigners. No doubt there are active enemies of Kolstar in that nation. And our country, the Phil-Pangaea, has the most poverty-stricken area. By increasing wages, businessmen in this country may want another president in. Lind interjected before Alian could speak. Everyone was shocked at Lind's sudden analysis. They looked at him strangely. Wow, I bet that was what Alian was going to say. Seeker laughed. More or less. Alian gave a charming look at Lind. Lind blushed as he too was surprised at his own monologue. We have groups in each country who can fuel the fire that can start the bandwagon of hate. If the media subtly introduces a series of bad news about him, then doubt will surely appear. There will be people who will fight for his cause, though, and attempt their own counter-reforms to uplift the image of the president. That is the problem. The masses love him, Harker interjected. Wrong. The masses are entertained by him. Only a few love him. Once people see several news reports of poor service, their entertainment will turn to disgust. The masses are an easily controlled group of people. If they see a trend in politics, they follow that. If we control all media outlets in the three Pangaea nations, we can mind control the masses. Trust in the stupidity and shallowness of the masses, General. Seeker smiled. It's true. Alian nodded. I'm not convinced. Merrill spoke once more. Having these groups wouldn't do much, Zeke. I mean, they are the minority. You forget the political opponents of the president. Politics is a game of patience. They have to know when and how to strike. There are only two politicians who are actively pushing their campaign against the president. It does not signify that the president has many allies. It only means that to most of his enemies, it isn't the right time to strike. Harker and Alian smiled at Seeker's words. How sure are you that the president has many enemies? Merrill frowned. Naive little girl. It was Harker who spoke this time. As long as the concept of self-gain exists, any king of this world will always have enemies. These politicians will follow and pursue the path that greatly benefits themselves. Seeker does not mean enemies who hate the president, but enemies who will turn against the president should the right opportunity present itself, giving them more to gain. Harker turned to Seeker and laughed. Who would have thought that your manipulative and scheming nature would be as strong as your physical skills? Chapter 38. The Great Gamble begins. Seeker was alone in the apartment for the stream that night. Due to the exhausted appearances of Lind and Merrill, Seeker agreed to do it alone. The last stream was barely 2 hours long when Seeker completed the game. Seeker once again rose to internet fame as he defeated the game in less than 19 hours. It wasn't far from Arthur's predicted time. This was already a record which even Precept Gaming had to acknowledge. No one was able to beat the current game at this time. Even among the pros, the estimate was about 22 to 33 hours, excluding the top brass like Precision. After the stream, Seeker went home and gave his parents a delightful surprise. 500,000 Sidians? Grace cried out in excitement. Chris was just looking at the amount of money that Seeker casually handed over as pocket money for their trip. This is too much, Zeke. We could afford the trip of ourselves. No need to give me those. Chris never had this much money in their bank account. Mom, Dad, don't worry. I don't need this much. I really don't. I already earn a lot with my online celebrity status. So take the money. You can go on a shopping spree or travel the world or something. I'll probably be leaving too. After tomorrow, I could be on my way to Australia for the Nations of the World Esport meet. Principal Decker was just kind enough to approve about a week-long leave at school, Seeker calmly explained. Grace and Chris looked at each other and smiled. You know what? Use the money to go elsewhere. I can probably earn enough to pay for whatever we need by the time you get back. If we win the tournament, which I am confident of, I should be able to take home about 200 to 500,000 Sidians. Seeker laughed. No, we just can't. Seeker, you are an adult now, and with this building career of yours, we want you to grow and to learn how to properly manage your funds. And I believe that letting you have a free rein over your money would be a better teacher than having me and your mom manage your funds. Right now, I think a little personal experience with that money can help you grow, Chris instructed. Of course, we appreciate this gesture of having us hold on to your money, but it's better if we discuss your plans now and just give you advice. Grace spoke dearly to the son who he was extremely proud of. Who said anything about giving you all my money? I have more. I even gave Lind and Meryl the roughly a 200,000, so they can send their parents on an all-expense-paid vacation. Seeker interrupted. The two parents stood silently. It was as if they tried to analyze Seeker's statement like it was a profound riddle or a difficult math problem. You gave your two friends 200,000 Sidians? Grace calmly asked. 200 each. So 400. Seeker nodded. Seeker, have you lost your mind? Grace tried to control her voice. What? No. I did what I felt I should do with my money, like what you just said. Seeker shrugged. I gave away some of my money to my friends and some to you. Think of it as a thank you to them for helping me. But I will be managing my money from here on. You gave away 400,000? Grace's tone rose drastically. Yeah, they earned it. They've been helping me, you know, both in advertising and all the technical help. They deserve it. How much money do you have left? Chris interrupted. Including this 500,000? About 4.5 million give or take. I earned quite a lot with all the advertising and stuff. Meryl and Lind really outdid themselves. Not to mention I got a lot of investors now who hold me in high regard. Seeker smiled. It helped that his parents weren't well-versed in gaming jargons. Give us 1 million, 2 million Sidians, Chris demanded. He was about to demand 1 million when he felt his wife giving him a strong pinch. Okay, I'll just withdraw some more tomorrow. Go wild on your trip, guys. Love you. Seeker kissed his parents goodnight. Typical of Mom. Seeker mumbled happily under his breath as he walked back to his room. Seeker's parents took the money and quietly walked towards their room. Howls of demented shouts and excited cries were heard as the late hours passed. Seeker was the first to arrive at the apartment the very next day. He was already setting up his computer for the big game. Lind and Meryl arrived together. You guys all right? Seeker smiled as he looked at the tired eyes of his two assistants. Lind gave an obvious look at Seeker. Meryl had a worried one. Are we going to do that training later? Meryl asked sheepishly. A different kind this time. Yesterday I needed to work on my gun skills. Tonight, it's going to be a close combat bonanza. Seeker smiled. Meryl was in tears. So, any signs of improvement? The two shook their heads helplessly. Seeker laughed. It's all right. We have a lot of time to prepare. I bet another day or two, and you can somehow touch on the basics of pushing your brain to a higher level of unlocking. The two sighed as they heard Seeker. Is there a trick? How does it feel when you try to push your brain harder? Meryl asked. Yeah. Zeke? What's the trick? I tried to concentrate so hard that my face turned red, but nothing happened. Seeker laughed as he remembered his younger days. Are you sure you were concentrating and not contracting all the muscles you can control in your general head area? Were you holding your breath as you tried to contract your muscles? Seeker laughed. I was, trying something. Lind gave an embarrassed response. Don't worry. The more you experience it, the more you get the hang of it. How sure are you this will work? Was this done on you? Meryl asked. No, of course not. The scenarios of my unlocking involved Charles. Due to the war, we were forced to evacuate this country. I met Charles during the escape, and at that time Charles already had developed a serum that was untested. One thing led to another and eventually got exposed to these drugs, which pushed my brain straight to the unbecoming stage. If that's how you got unlocked, then how sure are you that this will work? Because there were records of people getting unlocked during the war. Some even unlocked themselves without getting into life-threatening situations. How? We even went through hell and couldn't do that. Then how can others do that? Meryl had a curious look. I don't know. Even I can't even comprehend how some managed to do so. Seeker shrugged. The group continued on to prepare for the stream. It was time for Seeker to rule the gaming world. Seeker wasn't lying about the sponsorship. 3 international studios purchased the rights to air Seeker's stream on their channels for a pay-per-view setup. Aside from that, several local cable channels also did the same. It was pure hype. On the internet, it was known as the gamble of the ages. It was an arrogant claim. Even Precept Gaming has announced that it was virtually impossible to complete the game in less than 8 hours. The theoretical minimum would be the previous record that Seeker did. Although Precision's claim was even shorter, it still fell within the scope of possibilities that Precept Gaming announced. The moment the room opened, a gushing number of viewers immediately joined in. The room had over 1,000 viewers almost instantly. But despite this number, the room remained quiet. In this room, the list of names of online viewers contained names that any gamer in the world would know. The Covenant of the Strongest had their complete lineup logged in for the stream. Competing piercing esports celebrities were also present. Get Godlike of the Australian Oceania was also present. This caused the unusual silence in the room. Two of the most competitive piercing teams, who were also basically mortal enemies, were here. Begin. A commanding message displayed when the room was deathly silent. He was also another reason why the room was silent. Arthur coldly commanded. It was clear he was here to see the demise of Seeker. Various fans of Seeker didn't have the heart to even congratulate Seeker. They knew that doing so would display irreverence to precision. Haha. Chill arts. Just sit back and enjoy what you paid for. If that message just came from anyone, he would have felt the wrath of fans who was disrespectful from their fans. But the game handle of this person had a simple, yet very domineering name. Cronus, the commander of Get Godlike. Arthur didn't even bother to respond and just watched the screen. Haha. Seeker laughed as he finally broke the silence. My oh my, so much tension in the room. Well, here we are. Is it my judgment day or my day of triumph? Many may have well remembered that I just completed piercing bullet last night, but today I will do it again in a little over 7 hours. I see many people here to watch my awesome skills, and also another group who came to see me bury my gaming career. Quite a gamble I've placed here, and Arthur really made me tie my hands. Seeker smiled. If I fail, I end my career, which means I have no way of joining Get Godlike, even if they did offer me something. I signed the papers, and the lawyers have made the necessary preparations to set up this amazing gamble. Seeker took out a piece of paper. It was a legal document which formalized everything. I just hope that Arthur won't be mad at me for wrecking his prophecies. Now, let us begin. Seeker immediately started a new game in piercing. Bullet. The same cut scene appeared where Bullet was happily whistling and later started massacring his enemies. Seeker didn't bother to stay too long and immediately went ahead onto the next room to face the boss. As Seeker continued to attack and evade, a peculiar trend was seen. He's still using the melee build but abandoned the skill training? Arthur frowned. In all his calculations of trying to pass the game at record speed, this was the way to go. Skill and proficiency training was the best way. People then noticed it when Seeker was fighting the boss. An avalanche of comments started to pour out on the room. Seeker smiled as he saw this. I understand your surprise, friends, but if I want to beat this game at that time, I have no time for skill training. You'll understand how I will compensate for this. Seeker smiled mysteriously and continued to attack the boss. The boss fight took longer than his first playthrough. Without the skills and added damage from the proficiency of the attacks, Seeker spent more than 2 minutes facing the boss. As was already a standard, Seeker had yet to receive one hit. Seeker looked like he was casually playing, but his viewers were excited. Almost every attack that Seeker used was skill-based. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Seeker was slowly building the proficiency levels of his current skill as he progressed in the game. Various comments about Seeker's antics continued. However, most of the pros or well-known figures of the gaming world kept silent. There was nothing new in Seeker's progression. If anything, he sacrificed quite a bit of time by doing this. This was vastly noticed as Seeker progressed. Every boss fights were longer than usual. Arthur didn't look worried. He gazed straight at the screen and even looked like he expected Seeker to follow this route. The game continued to progress and soon, over an hour passed. Arthur was now smirking as time passed. The speed of Seeker wasn't anything special. Now, some may have noticed that my speed, although it is pretty fast, this won't be enough for me to pass the entire game to win the bet. But after this boss, I should be able to skip over 10 hours of gameplay. Seeker smiled. Arthur had a shocked expression. Chapter 39. The 2 skills needed. The boss battle began. Seeker had already increased proficiency on many skills, and the battle proceeded easily. As the boss health decreased to 0, the cutscene appeared. Bullet, who in the middle of fighting a brawny man with bright shining bracelets, suddenly took out one large handgun. He held that handgun like a tonfa. At the push of a button, a sharp curved blade protruded from the rear sight of the handgun and extended at an exaggerated length. Bullet, who held the handgun like a tonfa, now had a short blade. Bullet ran and thrust his rifle first, which were then blocked by something that looked like force fields. Bullet smiled and rammed the handgun's blade on the force field and pierced through it. The brawny man evaded the blade, but was met with Bullet's rifle. Smash! The brawny man somersaulted backward and gazed angrily at Bullet. "You have his weapon? Why? It's not cheating. He's my brother. It's only natural I get to use it." Bullet smiled. He took a stance which indicated he was ready for another clash. "Boring," the brawny man responded, and a large force field emitted under his fist. The man was then catapulted to the air and successfully escaped. "Coward," Bullet laughed as he took a look at the handgun. "Ah, screw it. He did give it to me. What's wrong in using it?" The cutscene faded, and the game continued. Seeker then controlled Bullet to move at a fast speed. Along the way, Seeker would use new combos as he had a new weapon to play around with. A mixture of melee and simple ranged attacks appeared as Bullet was now dual-wielding his weapons. One hand carried his trusted rifle, and another held the unique handgun which could also be used as a blade. However, keeping true to his promise, Seeker didn't add any skills on his ranged attacks and kept these attacks at basic shots. As Seeker continued to go along on his journey, the chat room was oddly quiet. Everyone was watching intently at what Seeker would do. There are two things that are necessary in order to beat this game at record speed. Seeker began to talk mysteriously. The direction which he was traveling was going towards a very familiar base. It was the base which Piercing used as its main area for storing and developing weapons. Because of this, it was heavily guarded. Throughout the majority of the game, this base was a suicide zone for most players. It was impossible to attack the base. The damage of the enemies in this area was overpowered that for most of the game. One hit was enough to kill Bullet regardless of what armors that Bullet could wear. The entire base used piercing ammunitions and complex tracking systems that would give headaches to every player. "He's heading for the main base," a viewer typed immediately as he realized Seeker's direction. Arthur watched as Seeker continued to move. He was frowning. This was pointless. The base contained high-leveled enemies, and even if Seeker did manage to kill one, it had an unlimited respawn rate. At this point, there is nothing to do at that base. The base was usually attacked late game when Bullet's level would be high enough and missions would be completed to drastically lower the base's defense. The first thing that is necessary is a comm mine that can keep track of the enemy's attack, Seeker announced as he finally reached the base area. Despite being far from the main entrance, some missiles and laser-like attacks were reaching his area. Seeker was able to casually avoid these attacks. This base has a total of 27 active enemies, all of which can kill me in one hit. Each has their own timing and attack pattern. On the far end of the screen, several enemy soldiers with a unique set of clothes were moving to the front line. Piercing fans immediately identified them as Pierce soldiers. The soldiers started to shoot at Bullet. The enemy used simple guns, but the odd thing was, the Bullet attacks had no animations to tell the players where the attacks were. These soldiers were also the reason who no one dared to attack the base. Players would die at these attacks and couldn't even reach the base. Seeker, however, smiled. His face slowly turned serious. Time began to slow down in his perception. 2 more seconds, and that missile should reach be a low attack. Must evade to the left as the Pierce should attack now, Seeker thought to himself. Everyone who watched the screen could only see a blur of commands as if Seeker was randomly mashing his controller. However, on the screen, Bullet kept dodging the attacks cleanly. Arthur gazed in surprise. He dared not blink as to skip even a second of Seeker's performance. On another city, located at the heart of Australia, a group of teens gathered around one computer to observe Seeker's performance. "Impossible!" A tall and very good-looking Caucasian with blue eyes shouted in surprise. "How good is the boss?" A timid Asian woman asked by his side. "He's as fast as I am," the blue-eyed man responded immediately. Seeker's approach was getting slower and slower. There were moments when Seeker had to retreat a couple of steps back in order to evade the attacks. The main turrets of the base fired 2 types of attack. One aimed to hit your current location, and another to hit the area directly in front of you. The Pierce soldiers all shoot aiming at your current direction. The mortars either hit your current location or the area directly behind you. So you need to be able to count the attacks of all these soldiers. Now, the troublesome attacks are the ones that the Pierce soldiers do. They attack almost randomly. Your only cue is to move once you see the gunshot. So the trick is to actually have them in your screens at all time, Seeker narrated as he focused on evading and moving. Arthur frowned. He couldn't have replicated what Seeker was doing. The attacks were too diverse and its conditions too harsh. That is the second requirement is speed, accuracy, and control. Since the random attacks of all these Pierce soldiers come almost instantly, you need to be able to react immediately and push the right buttons. However, be careful to move in the right direction to avoid the turrets, missiles, lasers, and stuff. Evading in the wrong direction can get you killed. Cheat. This is definitely a cheat. A chat appeared, breaking the silence of the chat room. Are you an idiot? Can't you see everything happening real time? This is pure skill. A fan defended. Seeker's movement of moving forward and backward took time. Eventually, nearly 20 minutes had passed and Seeker was nearing the actual gates of the base. Everyone was hyped at Seeker's beautiful execution of skills. It was over 20 minutes of pure concentration and expert maneuvering. This was just like Precision and Cronus battle back then. Several chats comparing Seeker's actions with another well-known event were made. People were continuously excited. Many cringed at the near deaths of Seeker. If any of these attacks landed, Seeker would immediately die. As he drew closer, the attacks of the enemy were getting faster as the turrets and mortar attacks had very little distance to cover. Seeker pushed his unlocking to the middle of the proficient rank of the unbecoming stage. Time was getting even slower than ever. This allowed Seeker to think where to evade as he would calculate the attacks and of the following enemies. Seeker controlled Bullet to jump backward, and the very moment Bullet's feet would touch the ground, Seeker immediately pressed the button to make another jump to the left. A gunshot from a Pierce soldier could be seen, so Seeker moved sideways and dashed forward as he saw an incoming missile. All three attacks happened almost instantly, but Seeker managed to evade everything. That's impossible. How did he know where to jump? He must have definitely cheated somehow. An angry viewer voiced out. Several were just about to insult this player, but recognized his name and knew he was a pro player. Seeker smiled. He turned to and looked directly at the camera. His focus was not on his screen. Even if it was Arthur, this reckless act of turning away from the screen for a second would mean death. And that's why you will forever be unable to defeat Arthur. Seeker smiled and turned his gaze back at the screen and easily maneuvered another set of jumping and dashing movements which evaded all attacks. I already told you the 2 skills needed to accomplish this. You say it's impossible? You are wrong. 2 people viewing this stream has these 2 skills. The first one is instant calculation. The Covenant of the Strongest gasped at Seeker's mention. Arthur frowned. Instant calculation was what he called his precise calculating skills. He could instantly calculate the time, speed, and even memorize the sequence or the enemy's eye at one look. This was what made him a king among many games. How did he know about instant calculation? Christine asked in an alarmed voice. Does he have it? Another pro player asked the frowning Arthur. Yes, but not all he has, Arthur concluded. Seeker continued to control Bullet, precisely dodging and evading the myriad attacks. People viewing his screen seemed to be getting dizzy at Seeker's movements. Calculating the attacks, however, is not enough at this case. Thanks to the presence of those 5 Pierce soldiers, we need Cronus skill. Millisecond reaction. Seeker smirked as he finally passed the area where the mortars and the turrets couldn't hit him any longer. The remaining soldiers, along with the Pierce soldiers, started attacking Bullet with long and close-range attacks. The blurring screen started to move faster. Every time Seeker would evade, a soldier would already be around him. Seeker would immediately jump to evade. It seemed fast, but on Seeker's perspective, he was carefully looking at his avatar's body. The moment the foot would land, he would immediately do another jump or dash. Not a millisecond was wasted in Seeker's movements. Cronus stared with mouths agape. The Guinness record for the longest piercing one-on-one fight came from the Great Piercing Commandos event 2 years ago. Precision and Cronus faced off one-on-one in what seemed like an endless battle. None of each other's attacks worked. Even at the speeding attacks of Precision, Cronus managed to evade every single attack thanks to his skill, which he dubbed as millisecond reaction. Precision always maintained his distance, far from the reach of Cronus. Precision had the entire map on his mind. A cat-and-mouse battle which lasted over 2 hours until Cronus slipped up and got done in by Precision's combo. It was later revealed that Precision's arm was strained at overstressing himself. Had Cronus managed to hold on, Precision would have lost. Cronus' eyes were focused on Seeker's hand. Precision has the eyes and can tell the exact second when an attack will hit and the precise angle he needs to take to avoid the hit. I, on the other hand, can react quickly. I can hit the right keys at the right time to make the right moves. In short, Precision has the eyes, and I have the hands. But Seeker has both, Cronus explained. Everyone on Get Godlike gazed in astonishment at Seeker's control. Seeker controlled Bullet to run at the back area of the base. The discussion in the chat room shifted from Seeker's skill to Seeker's purpose of raiding the base. The base had nothing for Seeker. He couldn't enter. He couldn't fight any bosses. Seeker then reached a hangar and started attacking the door of the hangar. People were confused. These doors were of no surprise to them. The Piercing series used such doors to hide secret passages or was used to unlock secret weapons. Seeker used the handgun and slashed at the door, and suddenly he paused the game. Everyone was confused. Now guys, pay close attention. Once I'm finished with this, I'll immediately be thrown late game. Seeker smiled. Chapter 40. The climax of the bet. The game was paused. Seeker just used the first strike of a 4-hit combo basic attack using Edge's handgun. Alright, now a little question and answer. In this game, these doors are piercing proof, and the only way to damage it is to use weapons that deal true piercing damage. Now, Bullet has no way of doing that, but Edge's weapon can. Seeker then unpaused the game and did another slash and paused it again. Seeker then smiled and looked back to the camera. When does the true piercing damage of Edge's weapon occur when it is used? Seeker asked. The more knowledgeable players started typing, but the first to give the answer was Arthur. The first strike. However, that weapon's true piercing capabilities is too weak. At this point, it is impossible to destroy that door no matter how hard you try. You're wrong again, Arthur, Seeker mocked. He unpaused the game and did another strike and paused it again. The truth is, it was made with that intention, but this specific game version of piercing. Bullet has a flaw. Seeker did his routine of unpausing, striking, and pausing. Seeker then pointed at an enemy pierce soldier nearby. The soldier was dressed in its trademark blue uniform but had a thicker set of armor. Veterans of the game knew this was an anti-piercing armor. What most don't know that the way these doors are set up is that it has its own set of hit points. Of course, we never get to see it in-game. So we assume that the way to break this is by using Edge's upgraded handgun, which we get later in the game. However, the truth is it is similar to the other enemies in this base. Seeker unpaused the game and did a quick evade from the enemy soldier's attack while attacking the door and paused the game once more. The hint we get is from the other enemies or turrets that this base has. I don't have the time to show you, but the reason why it would be impossible to destroy this base right now is that the true piercing damage of my current weapon cannot match the regen of the enemy's hit points. Seeker paused the game once more and did another strike and evaded some attacks from the surrounding enemies and then paused it. The problem is that the hit points of these doors regenerate at a fast speed. Arthur, how do you propose I destroy it? Seeker smirked. Arthur's response immediately was displayed. It's impossible. The true piercing attack on that handgun only happens on the first attack. You need to stop attacking for about 3 seconds in order to do another first attack, or it will combo. By the time you finish a set of attacks or wait for 3 seconds, the door would return to full health. Very precise. As expected of Precision, Seeker did his regular pausing routine, but you made one miscalculation. The truth is, the true piercing attack doesn't happen on the first attack, but it has a cooldown of 3 seconds. It's just a coincidence that the 4-hit combo, as well as the wait time, is 3 seconds. Seeker smiled and did his pausing, unpausing routine. Arthur and Christine were the first to realize it, but it was Cronus who managed to say it. A bug, Cronus typed. The viewers were confused. That's right, you finally caught on. This release version has a bug. The cooldown of 3 seconds applies even when the game is paused. Seeker did his last attack, and the door broke open. Immediately a cutscene occurred. Bullet was using Edge's handgun and was about to break the door open when a large blade protruded out of the door. Bullet barely dodged it as the attack nearly took out Bullet's eyes. The hangar was sliced open as Hollow appeared with his trademark scythe. Bullet, I'm here to get the gun back. You mean this gun? Seeker held the gun and switched it to its ranged form and started shooting. The game continued. Seeker kept dodging the attacks of Hollow. Worse still was how the surrounding soldiers continued to attack Seeker. This game is full of bugs. But that's exactly how I'll win this bet, Arthur. Seeker laughed. Seeker didn't attack Hollow, but attacked the nearest soldier. Surprisingly, the first combo immediately inflicted damage equal to a quarter of the soldier's life. What? Arthur screamed in surprise. Seeker continued to attack the soldiers and finally killed one. The experience points of killing this enemy caused Seeker's level to increase by 10. Confused? Think. The last cutscene showed how Bullet used the handgun of Edge. If you were careful to notice, it wasn't the old handgun. You see, at this point of the game, you must have the upgraded handgun to open up this area. That's how the game is supposed to work. So what happens if I don't have that weapon, but a cutscene requires Bullet to force equip that weapon? Seeker then continued on attacking with ranged attacks. Even the range attacks did tremendous damage to the soldier. He got an upgrade. It really is a bug. A viewer typed out. Instantly, an avalanche of comments followed. Seeker did another kill and managed several level ups immediately. Seeker continued to avoid Hollow but used his weapons to inflict damage on the surrounding soldiers. After 10 minutes of this soldier killing spree, Seeker finally focused on attacking Hollow. As Seeker had already presented an almost impossible array of skills, the battle didn't impress its viewers. People were just waiting for Seeker to kill the boss and move on. Seeker's damage was relatively small. People finally understood why Seeker did a quick power leveling training. The boss died and Seeker managed to unlock newer weapon upgrades and ammunition. Seeker immediately left the base. The exit was faster than the entrance as the turrets were all destroyed. Now that we have this weapon, I now can destroy the main hangar. That should catapult me into somewhere late game now. Seeker smiled. Everyone was shocked at Seeker's casual mention. He can do it, guys. A record of 8 freaking hours by Casual Carlean. A crazed fan was the first one to announce. With Seeker's new weapon, he now can kill enemies and inflict damage to bosses. By destroying the main hangar, Seeker advanced in the storyline, skipping 10 or so hours of gameplay. Seeker had just spent barely 3 hours of gameplay, and he was already at the late game stage. Suddenly, the angry gamblers who realized that they picked on the wrong side of the bet started complaining. Seeker ignored the argument and continued to press forward. Since Arthur wasn't complaining, he didn't care. Seeker's progression continued at a fast pace. However, every boss fight was a chore. As Seeker's skill proficiency was so low, the attack speed was slow and the damage wasn't very huge. Since Seeker skipped through a lot of the story's parts, he had limited unlocked skills and his rifle was next to useless. Most of the succeeding bosses took nearly an hour of fighting before Seeker would manage to defeat it. Soon over 6 hours has passed and Seeker was approaching the area where the last boss was. Seeker's head was throbbing. Throughout the game, also had been eating a lot of food and would take some pain relievers to minimize the throbbing pain of his head. He knew he had somehow overused his unlocking when he attacked the base. Seeker suddenly paused the game. Lind, could you give me a message? My head hurts, Seeker shyly asked. Lind gave Seeker a peculiar look. He didn't move or make any indication that he planned to follow Seeker's orders. Seeker then turned to Meryl. Are you serious? Yes, Meryl, I am. I have been spending the last 7 hours playing this game and it required a bit of concentration. So will you massage my head? Seeker spoke with a sarcastic tone. Meryl scoffed and hurriedly positioned herself behind Seeker and started to do the massage. Thankfully, the three of them would habitually massage each other, and due to that, the three knew a little bit about massaging. Meryl started to massage and Seeker continued the game. Seeker controlled Bullet to enter the final room and a cutscene occurred. Nope, I don't think I can. I overstressed my brain. Instant calculation and millisecond reaction really put a number on you. Lind, could you take over? Seeker held the controllers straight at Lind. Lind was dumbfounded. Look, Lind, if I play, then I'm dead. You know of my condition. I really can't. You have to play on my behalf. Don't worry, I'll tutor you. Seeker stood up and allowed Lind to seat down at his location. Meryl was tongue-tied. They were losing time, and now Seeker wanted Lind to take over. Seeker, Meryl cried. I'm serious, Meryl. I still need you to give me a massage. Lind, take over. We are running out of time. Just do what I do. Seeker arranged his seat and sat down with his seat inclined backward. Lind took the controller. It was clear that his hands were shaking. The game continued with Lind controlling Bullet. The cutscene ended just in time, and the battle began. The final boss was a small, frail man who looked like a teen. He had a very bored expression. Surrounding him were several floating orbs which would either shoot out laser beams or created a force field similar to the brawny man with the bracelets. Lind immediately panicked and started evading. Evade to the left, run off the side. Now continuously jump and dash towards the furthest orb on the left and attack it. Good. Now, stop attacking. Oh, be careful. One hit and half of your life would be gone. We are severely under-leveled. Seeker was casually instructing Lind as he received a massage from Meryl, who would occasionally shriek in terror. Relax, Lind. The gamble didn't include a no-hit clause. You can get hit. Of course. You'd probably die in 2 or 3 strikes. Seeker smiled. Oh, that was close. Back off a bit. You're getting to a bad position. Keep evading and return to the original spot you were when the fight started. Lind was paling in fright. It was almost a miracle that he could control Bullet correctly. Relax, Lind. We've been playing piercing for so long. And you were even better than me at one point. Just follow my directions, okay? Meryl, apply more pressure. Meryl was angry. She looked like she could just yank Seeker's head off. It was one thing for him to ask her for a massage during one of the biggest gambles the world has ever seen. But now, handling the controllers over to Lind. All right, let's start again. Try to keep up with my instructions. We're a little pressed with time here, and we could still lose. Seeker smiled. Lind's palm was sweating like crazy now. Seeker gave a series of instructions which Lind continued to follow. He managed to avoid getting hit a single time. Meanwhile, the chants and messages seen on the chat rooms were from those who placed their bets against Seeker. They knew if Seeker won this gamble, then people will definitely offer Seeker money double of Arthur's pay. The only choice was for Seeker to lose this gamble, so he can never play again. Seeing the prayers of curses and ridicule, Seeker laughed. All right, Lind, I think you got the basic. Just do what I would do. I'll stop instructing you. How about a last gamble? Since I'm betting everything onto Lind, I bet that Lind can defeat this boss without getting a single hit. I'm betting 100,000 credits for this. Seeker smiled. He walked over to the computer and opened the gambling den once more. There it was, a den with 100,000 credits wagered. Without skipping a beat, all of those who gambled against Seeker poured in their money. Seeker placed it on a 500 credit buy-in. There were even some who were loyal to Seeker who placed their bets. After all, they didn't know who this Lind was. Meryl looked worried. She looked at Lind, who also looked worried. But strangely enough, Lind felt calm despite this strange situation. Wake me up once you beat it, Lind. Meryl, please continue with the massage. Seeker sat back down and continued to enjoy Meryl's massage without any care for the world.